on TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is talkTV. talkTV News at 10.
Good morning, I'm Zora Stiglman. The world's richest man, Elon Musk, now officially owns Twitter after completing his £38.1 billion takeover. In his first move, the new boss reportedly fired a number of top executives at the social media company. He tweeted this morning saying the bird is free. Northern Ireland set for an assembly election before Christmas after the deadline to restore devolved government at Stormont expired. The region has been in political deadlock for months, with the Democratic Unionist Party refusing to return to a power-sharing arrangement in protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol. Member of the Northern Ireland Assembly for the Alliance Party, Nick Matheson, has told us an election won't solve anything, though.
We're going to have an election within the next number of weeks. It will, in all likelihood, not change the outcome, and we will still have one party exercising a veto. So we think that the reform is the essential part here to allow the next largest party to step in, join the government, and get on with actually sorting out the major challenges that Northern Ireland faces.
Arsenal Football Club have confirmed the defender Pablo Mari is not seriously injured after he was stabbed in a supermarket in Milan. The player, who's currently on loan to Monza, will undergo surgery on his back after last night's attack, which left one person dead and at least 5 others injured. In a statement, Arsenal say, "Our thoughts are with Pablo Mari and the other victims of the dreadful incident in Italy." Volodymyr Zelensky claims that Russia has launched more than 30 drones on Ukraine in just 2 days. The president says Vladimir Putin's forces have carried out 4,500 missile strikes and more than 8,000 air raids during the course of the war so far. A defense analyst told Times Radio that the attacks are seemingly aimed at damaging Ukraine's electricity and water supply just as temperatures begin to drop.
The Russians are trying to put out all of the critical national infrastructure to destroy Ukraine's power supply for the winter and to deprive it of electricity, heating, water and so on. And that is, if it's done deliberately, then that is a war crime, straight up, no question.
A British kayaker who capsized whilst crossing the Channel has been rescued by fishermen after clinging onto a float for 2 days. It's reported he survived by eating seaweed and mussels until he was picked up by a crew from the Netherlands. He's been taken to hospital suffering from hypothermia. And Just Stop Oil have targeted the high-end jewellers Rolex by spraying orange paint over their shop in central London. They're demanding that the government halts all new oil and gas licences. That's the latest. Now time for today's weather with Lucy Martin.
Times World News sponsors talkTV Weather.
Hello, it remains changeable into the weekend with spells of rain, some blustery winds, and it's looking mild as well. It's a mild start to the day this morning with some wet weather in the west. We've seen rain moving in overnight, and as we go through the day today, it's going to work its way north and east. There'll be some heavy bursts in there, particularly for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. There are some Met Office weather warnings in place for the rain, the potential for some disruption, some tricky driving conditions, localised flooding, that sort of thing. But once that rain clears, it's looking like a decent afternoon with some good spells of sunshine, perhaps 1 or 2 showers in the west. The winds will be blustery with that rain, but tending to ease through the afternoon, with temperatures reaching a high of 20 degrees Celsius in the south. And then as we go through the evening and overnight, it's looking fairly quiet. There'll be some clear spells, again 1 or 2 showers out towards the north and west. And again, it's looking mild overnight. Into the early hours, we see rain pushing into the south, and that's a sign of things to come through Saturday. On Saturday, we'll see a spell of rain pushing its way north. Be mild in the south and east, with temperatures again reaching the low 20s. For Sunday, a spell of further rain pushed in from the west. There could be the odd thundery burst. And don't forget, the clocks go back on Sunday as well.
Times World News sponsors talkTV Weather.
Straight talking, no nonsense, and annoying all the right people. This is talkTV. morning and welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk TV. It is the end of yet another incredible week of shows. I have to say, I have not, I think, had a day when it hasn't been remarkable in terms of news. All the way through, we've had all sorts of things happening. We've got a new Prime Minister this week, of course. We've got a new Chancellor from last week. He's still managing to hang in there. We've got a new Home Secretary. He used to be the Home Secretary, but he's now the Home Secretary again. We've got so much to talk about coming up into this weekend. Halloween looms on Monday, and for some obscure reason, it just doesn't feel quite right, does it? There was going to be a Halloween budget. That's not going to happen now either. Almost everything that we said was going to happen didn't happen, and then did happen. Elon Musk, for example, has taken over Twitter. First he wanted to take over Twitter, they said he couldn't. And then he said he didn't want to, and then they said he had to, and now he has. Is there something weird in the water this year? Nothing really happens the way it used to happen. So if I said, I'd like to go to Glasgow, and then somebody said, no, you can't go to Glasgow, and I went, OK, then I don't want to go to Glasgow, and then they go, no, you've got to have to go to Glasgow now. That's what's happened at Twitter. I don't know whether it's made any difference to the way things have gone. We're going to talk to Dan Hodges this morning, columnist of the Mail on Sunday, who's put out a remarkable story this morning that there's a poll that's been run, and I know you're going to say pick whichever poll you want, and one can say the Labour Party are 30 points ahead. This particular poll says that Rishi Sunak is much more in favour in terms of people wanting him to be Prime Minister than the man in the other corner, Sir Keir Starmer, the man who can't answer any questions, the man who can't tell you whether he said that Nadia Whittome had to take down a tweet about Rishi Sunak that could be considered to be racist. He can't also tell you whether Eddie Izzard would appear on a women-only shortlist. It's an extraordinary thing. We're going to be bringing you the latest news on everything that's going on in the course of the next 3 hours. We're going to be keeping you up to date. It is Poppy Day as well. It's the first day of the 2022 Poppy Appeal. As you can see, I'm wearing my Poppy. You should be wearing yours as well. If you feel like you don't want to wear one, I won't make you. If you feel like you don't think it's a good cause, then I'm sorry for you, and I shall forever pity you, but I will not force anything on you, because we live, after all, in a democracy, do we not? And you certainly wouldn't want people to be told that they had to say things the way they were supposed to say them. Something else that's really interesting, Prince William has announced he's not going to go to Qatar for the World Cup. Great decision. I don't think England should be going there as a football team either, but that's another story. Dan Hodges will have a view on that. Also, we will be talking about the other big stories of the day in politics, of course. The migrant problem. We're being told that there might have to be tented cities put up in various parts of the country to house all these migrants, because there's simply not enough room for them. There's not enough hotels to be taken over. It's an extraordinary state of affairs. 0344 499 1000. Also, of course, police solving less crime than ever. Well, that wouldn't be hard to explain, given the piece of video that we saw yesterday, talkTV put it out, of police officers actually protecting Just Stop Oil protesters on the ground from motorists who were so enraged that they wanted to lift them off the road. Police said they couldn't do it. Extraordinary times we live in. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We've got lots to do. Let's start doing it. This is talkTV. Can you give me a line? Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on talkTV. Lots to do, lots to talk about. Let's kick things off straight away with Dan Hodges, columnist for the Mail on Sunday. Dan, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I haven't really spoken to you since the latest outbreak of madness. I mean, it must have been a couple of weeks, which is now so long in politics. It's almost like a couple of years of reading Tolstoy. You know, we've had more U-turns than we can shake a stick at. As I said, we had Elon Musk, who said he wanted to buy Twitter, then was told he couldn't buy it, then was told he had to buy it, and has now finally bought it. Let's start with your tweet this morning about Rishi Sunak, and a tweet that I saw yesterday in which it was described that Labour have a massive problem with Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister.
Well, it was a slightly, you have to be honest, it was a slightly tongue-in-cheek tweet. I mean, I think the poll still shows Labour's got like a 26 point sort of polling lead.
Yes.
But it did show that Rishi Sunak is currently more popular in terms of the perception of who would make best Prime Minister than Keir Starmer. Now, that's obviously a situation we haven't seen for a while. Certainly towards the end of Boris's premiership, Keir Starmer was well ahead of him. I don't think there was ever a point where Paul Liz Truss was ahead of Keir Starmer. But in the space of a couple of days, that gap has narrowed, indeed been turned round, and it's something that is going to give Tory MPs in the difficult weeks and months again just a sort of a glimmer of hope, and also I think just have a little create a little frisson of nervousness amongst Labour MPs about whether or not they really have got the next election in the bag. I mean, at the moment, there is absolutely no doubt it is Labour and Keir Starmer's election to lose. But I think Rishi Sunak does at least give the Tories a bit of a chance, a bit of an outside chance of turning it round.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, the thing about Starmer, though, is that he still is problematic when it comes to several issues, isn't he? He's still a bit problematic when it comes to the whole Eddie Izzard, is he or isn't he? Is he going to be a woman? Is he not going to be a woman? He can't seem to answer that. He was stuck when he was asked a question by Sky News yesterday about Nadia Whitcomb and her tweet about Rishi Sunak. You know, he still seems timid when it comes to some of the bigger issues which are going to really affect who votes for him.
I think that I think that's a fair criticism. I mean, I think we have to give Keir Starmer credit. I mean, he certainly turned the Labour Party around from where it was under, in the dire days of Corbyn. But not being Jeremy Corbyn is not of itself a particularly high bar. I think the biggest problem and the biggest issue for Keir Starmer now and the Labour Party is the sort of the disastrous Liz Truss premiership has done one thing that I think is potentially in the Tories' favour, which is the prism through which we see politics now for the next 2 years is entirely going to be through the issue of the economy, economic confidence, and sound fiscal management. Now, Rishi Sunak, Jeremy Hunt, they're coming in. There's obviously going to be some difficult choices that they're going to have to make on spending, taxation. But it's quite clear they're now prepared to take some of those difficult choices, as opposed to Liz Truss, who pretended they didn't exist. But that is also going to start to ask questions of Labour. What is Labour's economic strategy and policy going to be? What is Labour going to cut? Where is Labour going to find efficiencies? Where is Labour going to save? And at the moment, I'm not actually seeing Keir Starmer doing much of a job in answering that question. No. It might not matter, because people may be just so sick of cuts, so sick of the Tories, so sick of austerity, they just say we're done with a lot of you.
Yeah, but I was certainly in that place when Liz Truss made such a complete dog's breakfast of everything, and then they started talking about having a row between Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson and Penny Mordaunt. I was just like, enough already. Let's just have an election, right? But there's no question that because Sunak has calmed the waters a bit, there'll be people like me who say, all right, well, let's see what he can do. I'm going to say, and I have said, if he makes some proper sort of changes and does some proper kind of direct initiatives before Christmas that make it look as if the government is going to work, then maybe he gets a couple of years and maybe he gets to win an election.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, time is the issue here. Does Rishi Sunak have enough time to take the tough decisions, to get a grip on the cost of living crisis, to get a grip on inflation, to start to get that out of the system, and then to start to turn the economy around and return to growth? And if he does that, we could easily be going into the next election with the classic, with the Tories, the classic election framing. We've been through hard times. You've been through hard times. We've had to take tough decisions. The economy is starting to turn. We're nowhere near out of the woods yet. It's just at the point where things are getting better. Don't let Labour wreck it. And that, at least, as I said, will give the Tories something to work with. Yeah.
And, I mean, the big story, and I know that, people would say, well, it would be the big story for talkTV, but the big story for our listeners and our viewers right now is absolutely and utterly immigration. And it seems to be now spiralling out of control, and now it's being covered by everybody. The Times are covering it, the BBC are covering it. We're seeing incredible amounts of numbers of people coming here. We're seeing stories about tented cities having to be put up. It is now a massive story in the mainstream, and the Tory party is going to have to solve it. And if they did solve that, for example, and they're talking on the front page today of doing a new deal with France, if that works, that could be a massive boost for them as well.
It could do. I mean, but that is still a very, very complex problem. I mean, I think just looking at the politics of it for a second, though, obviously, over the last few days, we've had this huge debate. I think you mentioned it in the introduction about, Suella Braverman, Home Secretary, sacked, come back within 6 days. Why did Rishi Sunak do that? It was a bad decision. One of the reasons in fact, the primary reason Rishi Sunak did that is because Suella Braverman sits very much on the right of the Conservative Party. Yeah. And what he's effectively done is say to her, and by extension, the right of the Conservative Party, okay, you want your person in there sorting out these issues. You've got your person in there. Suella Braverman is in there now. She's the Home Secretary. It's her job to solve the migrant crisis. You think you can do it from the right of the party? You think you've got the prescription for dealing with this? Show me you can do it. If she does it, Rishi Sunak wins politically. It's a big political win for him. If she doesn't do it, then it's kind of Rishi Sunak's going to turn around and say, well, Suella, you had your chance. The right of the party, you had your chance, and you blew it. So in a sense, I wouldn't go quite so far as say it's a win-win for him, but there is some sound political logic to what he's doing and the way he's trying to address the immigration issue.
Yes, and he has been quite hard line on that, and I think the fact that he's announced that he's not going to go to COP27, which seems to have wound an awful lot of people up who think climate change is a big issue. It's a less big issue for a lot of Conservative voters, I think, than it is for others. I think that also is quite an interesting signal to send out, that he's not going there because he's got more important things to sort out vis-a-vis the mini-budget.
Absolutely, and I think it was absolutely the right decision. I went to the last COP. It was a circus. Yeah. It was a farce. You have, the great and the good, from Joe Biden to God knows what Hollywood film star, jetting in, driving around in their chauffeur-driven limos, pontificating about the environment and driving and flying out again. The whole thing was quite frankly ridiculous. I think it's absolutely right that Rishi Sunak does say very explicitly, firstly, I'm sorry, but I've got slightly more important issues. I've got to get this mini budget right. Yeah. And secondly, that if we are going to engage on environmental issues, as obviously we have to, there are better ways of doing it than having this sort of annual or every couple of years
jamboree,
all singing, all dancing circus show.
Well, exactly right. The only thing they managed to agree on last time at COP26 was to have COP27 and to fly to Egypt. So If you remember the last time, it ended up with the British COP minister in tears on the podium. Yeah. So that shows how well it went last time. Yeah, I was in tears just watching him. But there we are. That was for a different reason. But Stan, stay where you are. We're going to talk about Qatar. We're going to talk about Prince William. Going to talk about a great many other things as well. Less crime being solved too. Also, of course, there's a big sentencing hearing going on today where the healer who decapitated a pensioner and stuffed her body in a suitcase. It's a £700,000 inheritance scam. She's going to be sentenced live this morning. Right here, we'll bring you that as soon as it happens. This is talkTV. Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk TV. Fascinating case which we will be bringing you live because a woman called Gemma Mitchell murdered a Malaysian pensioner and battered her to death, then cut her head off, put her body in a suitcase and dumped it in Devon. She's going to be the first woman sentenced live on television today at the Old Bailey, and we will bring that sentencing to you. She's a self-styled healer. She was found guilty, of course, in the Old Bailey. There's all sorts of things to talk about around the televising of such an event, but we will bring it to you, and it will be happening at some point, we're told, in the next possibly 10 minutes to half an hour. Right now, we're talking to Dan Hodges, our columnist at the Mail on Sunday. Dan, front page of the Sun this morning, I know you're a football fan, Will's not going to Qatar, which I think is also a very, very clear message and a very good decision, I think, by him, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. I think I agree with you, though. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what anyone's doing going to Qatar for this, for this World Cup. I think the whole thing is absolutely ridiculous. And I think it's good he sent that signal out. I do think this is a slightly complicated one though, because I saw there was a big a big row. There was a row early in the week when the Foreign Secretary James cleverly said, "Look, we're going to have to. I think he said there's going to have to be sort of flex or something. There's going to have to be on both sides. People who are going out there are going to need to be respectful, and obviously the Qatari authorities are going to need to be respectful. I think he's right about that. I mean, I think we're going to have to be realistic about how people act when they do go out there." Yeah. But I think in terms of the broader principle, I think what Prince William's doing is absolutely right.
No, listen, I mean, I was talking to somebody this morning about this, and I remember as a kid going to places like Venice and my father not being allowed into St Mark's Cathedral because he was wearing shorts. My mother being told she had to put a veil over her head. And in the same way that anybody goes to Saudi Arabia, if you're a woman, you're supposed to dress a particular way. I mean, that's absolutely fair enough, and as it should be. But I wonder if the heir to the throne has announced officially that he's not going, whether that brings a bit of pressure on James Cleverly not to go either.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I don't know whether government ministers are planning to attend. I mean, again, the one thing I would say, though, is, we've had a thing the last few days where we say, we want the grown-ups back in charge. We want grown-up politics. And that's going to mean also, if we want to be serious about that, that's also going to mean we need grown-up foreign policy as well. Qatar is an ally in a very, very sensitive area of the world. It is right and proper that government ministers have proper relations with Qatar. I don't think it's conceivable to say that government ministers in a blanket way are going to boycott the country. We need to maintain a dialogue. But I think that is separate, and I think it's perfectly legitimate for Prince William to make his own statement.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, we do buy an awful lot of gas from Qatar, which I presume will continue for quite some time, despite whatever the Just Stop Oil people want to say about life in general. Mark Drakeford's of course going as well, and he's going sort of against Labour policy because Labour under Keir Starmer have said that he doesn't want to go, he doesn't want to send anybody else from Labour.
Well. But again, I'm slightly confused about that because isn't one of the sort of one of the big advocates for Qatar, or has been doing, I don't know whether it's a promotional video or a documentary, is St Gary Neville, who, I mean, he's been over there loads of times, and I thought he was like one of Keir Starmer's best mates, and had recently joined the Labour Party. And there's talk about him being a candidate for the Labour Party. So again, it's an area where maybe Labour and Keir Starmer should look to get their own line sorted.
Well, exactly right. I mean, Gary Neville's kind of the new voice of Andy Burnham, isn't he? He's sort of a slightly bigger audience than Andy Burnham, so everything he says is almost as though Andy Burnham's told him to say it. Seems to me, anyway. Apparently, they're quite good mates. But Gary Neville's not averse, of course, to a bit of hypocrisy. He's taken the money from the Al Jazeera organisation to do a beIN Sport commentary position, where he's probably going to make quite a lot of money out of it.
Well, I mean, exactly. That's what I'm saying. So if we could just have a little bit of clarity rather than some of the sort of hypocritical hectoring that we get from Labour on these issues occasionally, that would be very welcome. A quick
nod to what's going on north of the border. Nicola Sturgeon is in a sort of row up there about this trans law that's coming in. 7 MSPs have gone against the party line. Rishi Sunak has again tried to sort of calm things between Scotland and Wales and Westminster. What do you make of what's going on up there?
Well, I think it's an extension of what is obviously a very difficult and frankly very depressing ongoing debate about trans rights. I mean, I think a number of sort of people on the progressive left are looking at this as just a classical. Obviously, Nicola Sturgeon's one of those people looking at this as a classic case of just basic protecting basic rights. But unfortunately, it isn't. It's an area where we have a collision of rights between those people who want to redefine as a different sex, a different gender, and those people who want to protect declared safe spaces, in particular for particularly for women.
Yeah.
I mean, my own view of this is there are only a few areas, and we all know what they are: changing rooms, prisons, etc., where there has to be a conflict over this. And I think with common sense and goodwill on both sides, we can resolve that. But I do think it is quite clear, and you can see in the way the debate is changing. You cannot simply say to somebody, well, you can simply define yourself, self-define as a woman, and then access what are currently protected spaces for women. I mean, that is obviously not a viable option, and that's why you've seen, the resignation and the other rebellion amongst members of the SNP up in Scotland.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a great one here from Hodges who says, Mike, I would like to thank the SFA and the Scottish football team in their stance to boycott the World Cup in Qatar. Of course, they boycott every World Cup in Scotland, don't they?
It was selfless of them. It was a selfless. I mean,
one of my favourite, I think, sort of memes of the year was the Scottish comedian who said, "Wouldn't it just be typical that we'd end up getting to a World Cup and it would be a place where you couldn't get a drink?" Which would have been. I mean, but it is a very odd thing. I mean, as a football fan, and I don't want to turn this into a sports programme, but I mean, it's not going to feel right. It already, to me, doesn't feel right. It's going to be 22 degrees tomorrow, and Halloween's coming on Monday. The clocks are going back. We're then going to have a World Cup happening at a time of year when there's never a World Cup. It's going to be very odd, stopping the Premier League to watch something in a faraway place. All the games, I presume, are going to be about sort of 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing actually for me is obviously what I'm seeing before is the break in the Premiership, because it's actually shaping up to be quite an incredible. It
really is.
Premiership season, and I can't remember watching a more fascinating sort of start to the Premiership, and the idea it's suddenly going to stop. Yeah. Is actually quite depressing, especially given, I have to be honest, I think England are travelling to this World Cup more in hope than expectation, to put it mildly. Yeah, absolutely right. Well, we shall see, no doubt. Who can say? I'm not even going to bother asking you what your prediction is for the political week coming up, because I've given up doing all that, because literally anything could happen. But Suella Braverman, do you think still around come Christmas? Well, she might still be around come 5 o'clock. Put it that way. I'm not going any further than that. This is where we are. Dan, thank you very much indeed. We'll look forward to reading your column in the Mail on Sunday this week. Dan Hodges there, not willing to go beyond 5 o'clock. I'm saying that. Do you remember when we were in the early part of last week, and I'm saying, I'm not sure if Liz Truss will last out the day? And finally, I was right, of course, because there was one day where she didn't last it out. We've got plenty to do. We want to hear from all of you, of course. 0344 499 1000. Got this from Dodo, who says, as a Conservative Party member, I never supported Rishi Sunak, mainly because I had a problem with his COVID expenditure. Mike, there is something in the water. I'm liking what I'm seeing with Rishi. He is very bright. Well, I think there is that. There is that possibility that he could pull this all back, couldn't he? Coming up, we're going to talk to a lawyer about the immigration problem in this country and why it is so difficult for the world and his wife and his husband and his mother and his father and his brother and his sister to do something about this. This is talkTV. It's Friday. I'm Mike Graham. This is talkTV. Welcome to Plank of the Week. You know what happens. 7 o'clock tonight, we are going to discuss all the big stories of the week and the biggest planks. And we're going to find a winner. And today, I'm delighted to tell you, we've got some auspicious company. It's Mr. James Whale and Esther Krakow to my right. And on the left, not because they're on that side of politics, it is Jeremy Kyle and Ava Santina. 7 o'clock tonight. Don't miss it. It's Plank of the Week.
This is talkTV News.
Good morning, I'm Zora Suleiman. The world's richest man now officially owns Twitter after completing his £38.1 billion takeover of the social media company. In his first move as the new boss, Elon Musk reportedly fired a number of top executives. Northern Ireland set for an assembly election before Christmas after the deadline to restore devolved government at Stormont expired. The region has been in political deadlock for months, with the Democratic Unionist Party refusing to return to a power-sharing arrangement. Member of the Northern Ireland Assembly for the Alliance Party, Nick Matheson, told us an election won't solve anything, though.
We're going to have an election within the next number of weeks. It will, in all likelihood, not change the outcome, and we will still have one party exercising a veto. So we think that the reform is the essential part here to allow the next largest party to step in, join the government, and get on with actually sorting out the major challenges that Northern Ireland faces.
Arsenal Football Club have confirmed their defender Pablo Mari is not seriously injured after he was stabbed in a supermarket in Milan. The player, who is currently on loan to Monza, will undergo surgery on his back after last night's attack, which left one person dead and at least 5 others injured. In a statement, Arsenal say, "Our thoughts are with Pablo Mari and the other victims of the dreadful incident in Italy." Volodymyr Zelensky claims that Russia has launched more than 30 drones on Ukraine in 2 days. The president says that Vladimir Putin's forces have carried out 4,500 missile strikes and more than 8,000 air raids during the war so far. And Just Stop Oil have targeted the high-end jewellers Rolex by spraying orange paint over their shop in central London. They're demanding that the government halts all new oil and gas licences. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to the Independent Republican Mike Graham right here on Talk TV. Coming up, it is Halloween weekend, of course, so there's going to be a lot going on. We've also got, of course, Poppy Day, 2022 Poppy Appeal launches today. I'm wearing a poppy. As I say, we'll be talking about that throughout the course of the show. It's a great cause. It is something that everybody should get behind. Halloween, of course, we were speaking on Jeremy Carl's show to somebody who does up his house up there in Lanarkshire. Lisa has tweeted me with a lovely picture, and I've retweeted it. As for Halloween, we have a light show in West Houghton, thousands of LEDs, the lights change to music, 2 times 30-minute shows over 4 nights. A shout-out would be great. Fair enough. Well, there you are. It does look pretty amazing. And Bob says this: please tell your mate Jeremy Carl we want Suella Braverman to stay as Home Secretary, as she is so committed to solving the migrant crisis. Well, you may say that, of course, Bob, but solving the migrant crisis has proved to be a somewhat difficult proposition for many Home Secretaries. Suella Braverman is now going to have a second bite of the cherry, but I don't really know whether she will be... she may well be committed to solving the crisis, but the crisis now is reaching ridiculous proportions. We're now hearing that there might be tented cities required in London to house all the migrants who can't be fitted in any longer to detention centres, to hotels, to private accommodation. The government this week asking people if they would like to put up some asylum seekers in their own homes. I mean, the whole business has reached epic proportions of lunacy, it seems to me. And let's talk to Dr. S. Chelvan, Head of Immigration and Public Law at 33 Bedford Row Chambers. Dr. Chelvan, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mike.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. This is a story that we've been covering for a very, very long time here at Talk TV, in our previous incarnation at Talk Radio. And it seems to me that suddenly everybody's woken up and gone, oh, blimey, this migrant crisis is quite a crisis, isn't it? Suddenly everybody's interested. Suddenly people are saying, why are we not doing something about it? I mean, how has it got this far without it being kind of addressed properly?
Well, we know from the article in the Times at the moment this whole thing about migrant tent cities was only a suggestion. It's not an actual proposal. And, you know, local boroughs in London would have to approve any proposal. But, you know, look, this is just testing the water with the...
Yeah. No, but for me, the fact that they're even suggesting such a thing seems mad, doesn't it?
Well, I wouldn't put anything past this government in relation to far bizarre plans such as Rwanda, etc. But let's look at the crucial issue. There are 120,000 asylum decisions to be made. They are taking, at a minimum, an average of 480 days for for an asylum decision to be made. So that's why we're having an issue in relation to the fact that those refugees who come to the country lawfully to claim asylum are not being processed effectively. Some of my clients are taking up to 3 years between the initial application and even being interviewed. And then getting refugee status.
So you represent. So do you represent a lot of people who are seeking asylum?
Yes. Well, I've been practicing in this field for over 20 years.
Okay. So how do you find these clients? Where do you get them from?
Sorry, I don't know if you understand. So I'm a barrister,
right,
and I'm instructed by solicitors.
Okay.
So solicitors come to me with cases in the main or direct access. So these are individuals who are in the country who have. I do mainly legal aid cases where they don't have any means, and there's a clear meritorious case. Because Mike, the facts are there's a great opportunity to get the facts because the facts don't lie. Over 50%
I'm very big on facts.
are granted refugee status, and out of that, an overall 70 to 80%. So the majority of people who come to the UK are genuine refugees or entitled to some sort of future.
Well, when you say genuine refugees, you see the difficulty for the people who are getting a bit fed up with the numbers of people coming and being granted asylum or not granted asylum or just not leaving for whatever reason, is that, the definitions are important. And when we talk about facts, the definition of a refugee is something which might or might not, in many people's minds, qualify them under any other circumstances to come here. So, I mean, legally...
Tell me what you understand as the definition of a refugee.
Legally, no, it doesn't matter what I understand as the definition of a refugee. What I'm saying is that I'm here
You're a member of the public.
I'm here to ask you questions. It's not the other way around.
Right.
So what I'm saying to you is that, it's all very well laughing about it, but we are sitting here in a crisis, right? You're making a lot of money out of it, so congratulations.
No, I'm not. I'm not making anywhere near what a commercial barrister will be learned.
Well, you're making a living, aren't you?
So I do this work.
Yeah, but you are. It is your. There's no point talking at the same time, right? I'll let you talk. I can talk as well. The point is, it's your business to do what you do for a living. It's fine. You make a living out of it. It's absolutely fine. Many people coming here seeking asylum, I'm sure, would like to live in Britain. I'm sure many people here would like to go and live in Beverly Hills. It doesn't mean they should come here. The point is that you can take a view on the refugee crisis, but what you can also take a view on is the fact that as well as I do, that an awful lot of people coming specifically on these boats across the channel are being trafficked. Now, you might say that's happening for a number of different reasons, but there's a criminal part to this. And that's the part that I think needs to be addressed. I don't really want to address the whole asylum system.
You've identified the key word. If they're being trafficked, then they are, eligible for protection under the Trafficking Convention.
I think we need to
be careful about definitions, because I'm a lawyer.
Yeah.
So I look at what you say and see where
I'm very careful. I'm very careful about my definitions, because the whole point of what we talk about on this show, and I talk many, many more words every day, probably even than you do, and you probably talk quite well. But the point is this. We have to surely identify the difference between people who are coming genuinely because they are seeking refuge from danger and people who are coming for another reason. And I think
we know that 70 to 80% are genuine refugees or in...
I'm not disputing that.
So, look, this is what Parliament has enacted. We're part of the 1951 Refugee Convention, 1967 Protocol. Britain has a historic link. Remember, we had, less than 100 years ago, the Empire, now the Commonwealth. I mean, I specialise in claims of sexual and gender identity. People who are lesbian, gay, bisexual. The UK exported colonial laws which have been used in these countries to persecute, kill, rape and murder people. So, that is the historic...
well, don't worry, they were persecuting, raping... Well, I've got some news for you, actually. The persecution, rape and murder has been going on around the world since the year dot. It's not something that was exported from Britain.
The colonial laws which are used to enable people to kill, murder and rape people are exported by Britain. That's a fact.
Well, listen, if there are countries around the world where you get killed for being a homosexual, you're saying that's our fault, are you?
Sorry, is it that the laws were exported by Britain through the Empire? That's a fact.
Well, homosexuality used to be illegal in Britain, but it's not anymore. So
that's why we changed the law to be able to protect.
Well, I'm not sure what your point is.
Mike,
what is your point?
What your viewers want to know is that are people who come to the UK seeking asylum genuine or not? And the Home Office facts and our independent judges and tribunals have said that the majority are genuine. So that's your views.
Yeah, that's because
they want to know this
but that's easy. That's easy. No, but that's an easy fact. No, well, it's not. The fact is, the Home Office is not fit for purpose. You know it, and I know it. As you said, they've only processed 4% of the cases that they've been looking at over the past.
And Robert Jenrick has said, and it's reported in the Times, Robert Jenner accepts that the 117,000, just under 120,000 asylum cases to be determined, we need to be able to focus on that, because these migrants are waiting for the Home Office to even fix an asylum interview. They're here seeking our protection. Yeah. The facts speak for themselves. The majority are genuine. We need to have proper funding in relation to the Home Office to make those decisions and not allow the system.
Let's put it this way.
To allow these people to wait for an interview.
Let's put it this way, okay? Let me put it to you this way. The majority are judged to be genuine, which is not quite the same thing, as you well know.
The laws of this country, Mike, we live by the laws of this country.
One of the qualifications to seek asylum as a genuine asylum seeker, as a genuine refugee, is that you fear the return to your own country, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. Well,
a country of nationality or habitual residence.
Right.
That's so
if you say, so let me put a scenario to you. So if you say that you fear going back to your own country because you're a homosexual, then you will be judged.
Man, we don't use the word homosexual. That's a bit of outdated and discriminatory.
Well, what word do you use?
Let's start talking in 2022.
All right. Well, which word would you prefer me to use?
Well, gay man, lesbian, gay.
All right. So if you say, all right, okay. So I would like to use any word that I want to use, actually, because I don't get told what words to use. But if you wish me to use that word,
it's offensive to me as a gay man that you use that.
If you find me calling you a homosexual offensive, then I think you should get a new job. But I will call you a gay man if you prefer.
Thank you.
The fact is, if you say that you're gay, and if you go back to your own country, you will be in danger of torture or death. That will then make you judged to be a good asylum seeker and somebody
a refugee
and somebody who is a refugee. So that's what I'm saying. So the law says that you are one, but you could be lying, and we don't know.
No, because it's about credibility assessment. So there's
but the credibility assessment isn't worth the paper it's written on.
I mean, I'm more than happy to provide you a sort of asylum law 101, but it's
I know what it is. I know exactly how, and I know how people get around it. Yeah, but I know asylum. I don't need a condescending barrister to talk down to me as if you're the only person that knows anything. I want to
share information.
No, you're being condescending. You're being very condescending, and it doesn't surprise me because that's what you people do. But let me ask you this question, right? Do you not accept?
I'm trying to provide you the information.
No, do you not accept that there are some who are judged to be refugees who might have made up a story in order to stay here? Do you accept that?
No. Because the point is, because the reason...
So nobody does that.
Then I wouldn't... So look, Mike, the point is you're always looking at the negative and the glass half full.
No, I'm looking at the big picture.
I'm looking at the laws of England and Wales, the way that we have the Home Office making initial decisions. We have independent judges and tribunals. If we don't believe anything, then we might as well be in dictatorship.
What I'm telling you, no, you see, once again,
the laws of this country,
once again,
you're independent judges and tribunals.
No, it suits your purposes to say that. Of course it does.
It suits your purposes to be right-wing and talk about...
I'm not right-wing. What makes you say that? What makes you think I'm right-wing?
Well, the fact that you're indicating that you don't believe that the system works and
the system doesn't work. The system plainly doesn't work. The Home Office knows it doesn't work. The government knows it doesn't work. You know it doesn't work. It works for you.
No, it works in the fact that genuine refugees are granted refugee status and have sanctuary and safety.
Yes, they are.
If I didn't believe that the system worked, I wouldn't be part of the system.
Yeah, but the fact that you are unwilling to accept that some people make use of the system and abuse the system is extraordinary to me, because you should know that they do.
There are always outliers.
So you admit that there are people who do make up stories.
But when we look at the majority...
It's not the question I asked you.
Want to know is that does the system work in relation to the Home Office and our independent courts and tribunals, and it works?
That is not the question I asked you.
There needs to be a processing of the claims.
Okay.
The Home Office used to have
all right, well, let me ask you the question. Let me finally ask you the question another way. I'll give you a chance to redeem yourself.
I don't think I need to be redeemed, but...
Yeah, I know, because you're too pompous. Let me put it to you this way. Would you accept that there are some people who manipulate the system in order that they can stay here by telling untruths? Would you accept that some people do that?
The human condition...
Yes or no?
Such a way that there will people. No, I'm not going to make an admission that the system is infiltrated.
I didn't ask you about the system. I asked you about individuals. There will always be the outlier. Of course. Yes, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, thank you. You've just admitted it. That's fine. Thank you very much indeed. Bedford Road Chambers, a lawyer. That's why we have a problem in this country. Let me tell you. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is talkTV. Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk TV. We've got lots to do. Many of you want to get on the phone after listening to that last tirade from me and the barrister. We'll get back to that. 03444991000. We told you earlier that there was going to be an event this morning at the Old Bailey. The first woman sentenced live on television today. I think we can go there now. It's Gemma Mitchell, who's a church-going ex-osteopath. She's been found guilty of murdering Malaysian pensioner Mi Kuen Chong, aged 67. Who was a property developer. This was a dreadful, horrible murder. I think we can go to the sentencing right now.
In a domestic context, I propose to ignore that and to treat you as a woman of effective previous good character. You are clearly a highly intelligent woman.
You're hearing the judge at the Old Bailey sentencing Gemma Mitchell, saying that you are clearly a highly intelligent woman. It's Judge Richard Marks, King's Counsel, who is broadcasting the sentence. There's been an awful lot of talk around this particular incident and around this particular case, but not least because of the way that the sentencing is actually being televised live as we are currently watching it. The facts of the case were that after the woman, Gemma Mitchell, murdered the Malaysian pensioner in what was described as a £700,000 inheritance scam, she cut off her head, stuffed the body in a suitcase and then dumped it in Devon. We'll be coming backwards and forwards to this as the sentencing hearing goes on. But let me talk to you first of all about another thing that's happening today, and it is, of course, the launch of the 2022 Poppy Appeal. And there's something very important that I'd like to tell you about that, because, as you can see, I'm wearing a poppy. I don't particularly want to entertain, like some people do on these occasions, a debate about whether or not we should, in fact, wear a poppy, whether we should wear a red poppy, whether we should wear a white poppy, whether the poppy's different in Wales and Scotland and England. I don't want to talk about all that. But what I do want to talk about is the importance of Poppy Day and the importance of Remembrance Sunday and the importance of why we do it. And there's a story in The Sun today which really sums everything up for me, and it's about how D-Day veteran Bernard Morgan, who's 98 years of age, receives a poppy from a girl of 6 at the launch of the Royal British Legion's appeal, and basically, even though they are more than 9 decades apart, separate former RAF Sergeant Bernard and Maya Reynard, both of them have been helped by the Veterans Charity. We'll talk more about that. Let's go back to the Old Bailey just for a moment to hear what's going on.
Mental illness. Having been diagnosed some years ago with paranoid schizophrenia, and she had spent some months as an inpatient at a mental hospital. Shortly before you killed her, she had suffered a relapse and, against her will, had been put on antipsychotic medication. As such, and as you well knew, she was particularly vulnerable, both mentally as well as physically, and the jury saw from the CCTV evidence how in the days before her death she walked with difficulty, needing to hold on to the arm of her lodger as she did so. The messages that passed between the two of you showed that she was very well aware of your problems with regards to the house and was proactive in attempting to help you. This culminated in her offering to give you £200,000 to spend on the house, an offer, however, which she withdrew a few days before you killed her, which I am sure is what led you to do what you did. On the morning of the 11th of June of last year, you set off early from your home address, taking with you a large suitcase, which it was evident from the CCTV was either empty or had very little in it. You went by public transport to her address, and you stayed there for over 5 hours. When you emerged from the property, it was clear from the CCTV evidence that you had injured your hand. I'm satisfied that can only have happened whilst you were inside the house and must have occurred in the course of the killing. Later that evening, you attended St Thomas's Hospital, where you were treated for a fractured finger. You claimed that had occurred when you trapped it in a car door. In my judgment, that was clearly a lie. The suitcase that you had taken to the house was now very obviously full and heavy. You also now had with you another case. I'm sure that this other case was the one that the police later recovered from your home. It is clear that it belonged to Deborah Chong, and it contained many documents that also belonged to her, including her passport, driving licence, naturalisation papers, bank credit, and other loyalty cards. That large suitcase contained Deborah Chong's body. I have no doubt that you had killed her whilst you were at her house. And, absent any explanation from you, given that you went no comment throughout your police interviews and did not go into the witness box, I am driven to the conclusion that you went to her house that morning with that intention in mind. 2 weeks later, you hired a car for a period of only 24 hours. You were seen on CCTV to put that large suitcase into the hire car. It was clearly heavy, such that you needed a trolley to wheel it down the road and into the car. That is because it contained Deborah's body. You then drove down to Devon, where you clearly planned to dump her body. But your plans went awry when you had a puncture which had to be attended to by the AA. This meant that you had rather less time down there to find a place to secrete the body than you had envisaged, hence why you were unable to find a more remote location than you did. The place that you alighted upon was at the bottom of some steps on a public footpath by some woodland adjacent to Bennett Road in Salcombe. A truly telling piece of evidence against you was the fact that that evening, after the punctured tyre had been repaired, your hire car was seen being driven by you on Bennett Road, 50 metres away from where Deborah's body was found the following afternoon by a lady who was out walking. That grim discovery was made all the worse by the fact that her head had been cut off. It was not found until a number of days later, some 10 metres away from the body, further down the hill beneath some undergrowth. Because of the extent of decomposition of the body, the pathologist who carried out the autopsy was unable to ascertain the cause of death. But what was found was that she had suffered a comminuted fracture to the skull, as well as multiple rib fractures. As part of your degree, you were taught anatomy, and you included on your website, which advertised your services as an osteopath, the fact that you had experience in the dissection of human bodies. That no doubt stood you in good stead when you cut off Deborah's head, although why you chose to do that remains a mystery. Following your arrest on the 6th of July, amongst the items found by the police at your home was a will which purported to be that of Deborah and to leave 95% of her assets to you, and the remaining 5% to your mother. That will was fake. It was written by you, and it contained signatures of Deborah and 2 witnesses, each of which had been forged by you. One of the persons whose signatures you forged was that of a man by the name of Virgil Georgita, an erstwhile neighbour of yours who had died some months earlier. Following his death, you had managed to gain access to his room, and you took from that room various papers of his, including his passport, as well as his mobile phone. A short time later, you rang the phone company, pretending to be him, giving his name and date of birth, and you had the phone reactivated. It was his phone rather than yours that you used to book the hire car, and it was his phone that you took with you on the trip to Devon, leaving your own at home. Moreover, the evidence of the handwriting expert was that his purported signature on the will had been copied from his passport, which you had removed from his room. Quite apart from anything else, I am driven to the conclusion that you are extremely devious. I said at the outset of these remarks that I would return to the issue of mitigating and aggravating features. The sole mitigation is that you are effectively a woman of previous good character, although given the gravity of your crime, in my judgment, that entitles you to only a very modest discount. As to aggravating features, there are the following. Firstly, the amount of planning and premeditation that went into this offence, although it is right to acknowledge that this is bound to be an invariable feature of a killing done for gain, and I must avoid double counting in that regard. Secondly, there is the issue of Deborah's mental and physical vulnerability, to which I have already referred, and of which you were very well aware. Thirdly, there is the chilling aspect of what you did to and with her body after you had killed her. You have shown absolutely no remorse, and it appears that you are in complete denial as to what you did, notwithstanding what, in my judgment, amounted to overwhelming evidence against you. The enormity of your crime is profoundly shocking, even more so given your apparent religious devotion, as well as the fact that Deborah Chong was a good friend to you and had shown you great kindness. The sentence of the court is one of life imprisonment, and the minimum term of imprisonment that you will in any event be required to serve will be 34 years. There will be deducted from that term the 475 days that you have spent in custody on remand, and the statutory surcharge will apply. Would you please take the defendant downstairs?
And there it goes. The cameras in the court for the first time, sentencing a woman in the Old Bailey. That was, of course, Judge Richard Marks, 34 years handed down to Gemma Mitchell for murdering Malaysian pensioner Mi Quen Chong, 67 years old. Fascinating in its way. Many of you, I know, will probably be thinking that they could have perhaps made that slightly more, shall we say, dramatic. But that is what courtroom life is like. If you've never been in a court, if you've never seen a sentencing hearing, that's exactly what it's like. It's very calm. He even uttered the words, "take the defendant down." That means back to the cells. the woman who is now going to spend the next certainly 20 years in jail, you would imagine, sentenced to 34 years, Gemma Mitchell, for murder, will become the first time, obviously, that somebody has been sentenced live on TV. She was found guilty of murdering her friend. It's said to have been a £700,000 inheritance scam that was going on. She intended to steal that money from Ms. Chong's estate by forging a will in her favour. It was absolutely an extraordinary case, not least because of the fact that she looks, to all intents and purposes, I know this is sometimes not an easy thing to say, but she looks, to all intents and purposes, to be a very average woman. Her victim, again, was her friend. She was a medical student who had turned into a property developer. But after the murder was committed, and this was in June of last year, she basically cut the woman's head off, stuffed the body in a suitcase, and then attempted to drive to Devon, where the body was then dumped. She left the body badly decomposed in some woods, but of course she also heard about the drama when she tried to originally drive away with the body in the car, that she got a puncture, which obviously was an extraordinary thing. One of the reasons why she was able to actually do the dissection of the body was that she was a trained osteopath, and she'd often boasted online about her award-winning skill in human dissection. She declined to give any evidence at her trial, and she denied having anything to do with Miss Chong's death. But as you heard there, she's been sentenced to 34 years in prison for the murder. So we'll bring you an update on that story as soon as we can, live, of course, from the Old Bailey. This is talkTV. We do, of course, have a great many things to do. Many of you sending in some great messages about that barrister. Marty from Cornwall says, great show this morning. Regarding our country's out-of-control immigration situation this last couple of years now, I can see how easy it is to legally stay when represented by people like the barrister you were just interviewing. Very pompous-sounding person, in my opinion. And Trev in Newcastle says, Mike, you're wasting your time trying to argue with lawyers about illegal immigration. It is their bread and butter earnings, and they aren't going to surrender that any time soon. We've just been listening to the sentencing hearing at the Old Bailey. Judge Richard Marks, KC, King's Counsel, of course, is what they call it now. He's absolutely incredible story. 34 years in prison. Let's get an update now from our news team. What can you tell me?
Hi, yes,
Hi.
so we've just had the first sentencing, well, the second ever televised sentencing, but this was the first ever murder sentencing, which was televised, and the first in which the defendant was a woman. So that ultimately she was sentenced to 34 years minimum term, but life in prison, and from that she'll have the 475 days which she spent in custody deducted from it. It was quite poignant really watching it, because obviously normally the insides of courts are completely no access to the public.
Yeah, you've probably seen inside a courtroom. I used to cover court cases as well, so for us it's not that unusual. But it's quite a solemn place, but it's a fascinating place as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the whole point of it really is that they want the judiciary process to be more trustworthy, more transparent, and by showing parts of it, hopefully the public will be able to understand it a bit better and trust in it more.
So not every case will be televised. Is it something that people can object to if they're actually involved in the case?
I'm not sure whether people can object to it, but it's definitely something that's going to become more commonplace. So even though obviously it's quite a new thing for England and Wales, it's something that's going to be happening more and more, and that we can become more familiar with, definitely.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Eleanor Sherwood there, talkTV's reporter at the Old Bailey. You would have heard the case, as we said, 34 years, a sentence which has been televised for the first time. The first time a woman has been televised being found guilty and sentenced for murder. 34 years at the Old Bailey. Let's talk now, though, to former Metropolitan Police Superintendent Palm Sandhu, because we've got several police stories to talk to with her this morning. But Palm, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Just a word on this case, really. Terrible, terrible case. And, I mean, sometimes we worry about the figures and the arrests that police make. But, I mean, for any police officer involved in this case, finding a decapitated head in the woods in Devon, I mean, it must be a pretty awful scene. And it must be pretty awful to work on these kinds of cases.
I think it's really sad for the family as well, because, if she's got any family or extended family, for them to know that that was done to her body afterwards by someone that she trusted, that she befriended and trusted, and who had access to her money, her home, everything. It's just the ultimate betrayal.
Yes.
And then for the family to have to then deal with the burial of a decomposed body that has been decapitated as well. It's absolutely dreadful.
Oh, it's dreadful, absolutely right. Let's get back to the matter in hand, which is, I'm afraid, yet another report of police, I would say just inefficiency, really. You can maybe put some context around it, but some more statistics that have come out which basically show that police are solving less crime than ever. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
It is pretty damning, but what we've got to remember is there are less police now than there were 10 years ago, and those police officers are being asked to do jobs that they weren't being asked to do 10 years ago. And the majority are good, hard-working people, are dealing with mental health issues. They're dealing with issues that normally would have been dealt with by social services. They're attending medical emergencies.
Yes.
And the biggest drain of all is that they are dealing with protesters who are gluing themselves and causing chaos left, right and centre. So policing isn't about catching the bad guys anymore. Unfortunately, it is about doing all of those other things as well.
I mean, the figures are stark. It says here only 5.4% of all crimes resulted in a charge in the year to June, which is literally 1 in 20. This represents a fall from 6.5% the previous year, and just a third of the charging rate from 7 years ago, 15.5%, when probably you were still in Metropolitan Police. It comes as recorded crime has hit an historic high of 6.5 million offences, up 7% since before the pandemic. So it's a pretty dreadful state of affairs, really. We hear that in the Metropolitan Police, certainly, we've now got a new boss. He's vowing to improve things. We've got a new Home Secretary twice over. She's back again. She's been talking about making the police less woke. But, I mean, is this a bit like turning around an oil tanker?
It is a little bit, in that the resources aren't there to actually turn that tanker around. But in addition, there's something like 78% of burglaries are closed down with no suspect ever being identified. And burglary is a thing that affects most people. And only half of those burglaries were ever attended in person. So I welcome the fact that all burglaries will now be attended by a police officer. I think it's really important.
Yeah.
And that's what police officers join for, because that is an intrusion into your private life, your home life. And that's where people feel most unsafe if that happens. And in relation to car theft and bike theft, over 90% of those are closed down without any suspect at all. So police aren't doing what police officers should be doing, and that needs to change.
Yeah.
And if that takes 6 months, if it takes a year, then so be it. But one of the most appalling statistics is the one around rape. And the conviction rate for rape is less than 1.5%, and it takes 2 years for a case to get to court. 2 years.
Yeah.
A person.
And that's a terrible imposition, not only on the victim, but also on the accused, because, you know, we know that the rates of conviction are very low, partly because it's one word against another in the end. But, I mean, it's not a pleasant situation for anyone to be in, is it?
No, it's not, and it's not acceptable, because justice should be given quickly and effectively, not 2 years, you know, possibly longer, 3 years later, for both sides. And it is for the, you know, for the suspect as well. If they are innocent, they need to be able to go to court and put their side of the story forward.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, biggest increases are sexual offences, up 21% to 196,889, the highest number on record. I mean, it's a staggering number, that, isn't it? And, I mean, does that mean that more are being reported perhaps now, or does it mean there genuinely is an increase in that kind of offence?
I'd like to think it was more are being reported because there's more media coverage, there's more unaccepted, you know, people are pointing out what is unacceptable. So some of those offences will be, you know, people would have accepted it in the past, or they wouldn't report it, or they would be too ashamed or embarrassed. So people are coming forward. So I'd like to think it was the fact that more are being reported, not that the society has changed and those crimes are being committed more frequently. I mean, I think it's more about trust.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that people that I speak to genuinely feel more unsafe on the streets of this country now. You know, we see more and more cases of, I mean, some of the violent crime that's happening on the streets, whether it's gang on gang, but there certainly feels like there's more of it. I don't know if you saw an incredible scene up on North Wales in the A55. There was like a car chase going on where these guys in a BMW were sort of shutting off access to a van. They got out, they started throwing things at the van driver drives off. I mean, it's an incredible scene. You see these kids going up and down Park Lane on bikes, basically robbing people at will. You know, it's an incredibly kind of brazen act that many of these people are now carrying out and just sort of robbing people in the street. I lived in New York City when it was like that, and I remember I used to, you know, sort of be very wary walking around, even in broad daylight. You would see gangs of teenagers kind of rolling tourists in the middle of Times Square, you know, literally sort of barrel into somebody, knock them onto the ground, take their watch, take their wallet and run off. It feels like that now. And you're right, that is how people feel, because there is no deterrent. Because if you don't catch these people, if you don't then lock them up in a cell without a PlayStation, without designer clothes, where they are being punished for the crimes that they've committed, there's no deterrent. And the only way that you can stop those crimes from happening is if those people fear that they are going to be caught, prosecuted and put into prison. If you're not catching the people in the first place and then you're not charging them and then they're going to prison and they're being given all these designer goods, there's no deterrent at all. No, exactly right. I mean, I always get calls from people after speaking to people like yourself on the TV. I had one call which absolutely amazed me. It was a woman, I think, who said that she reported a burglary to the police 7:30 one night. By 10:30 she had another call to say they'd closed the case. And they hadn't even talked to her about it. You know, it was one of those where you just, as you were saying earlier, they just close it off. That's right, and that is what's happening because of the lack of resources. What they're saying is, if there's no other evidence, they'll close it down. But how do you know there's no other evidence if you don't go and visit that person in the first place and check, is there CCTV, did any of the neighbours see it? How can you close those cases down? It's not right. No. It just isn't acceptable. So, I mean, if you were in the Metropolitan Police now, and we've got the new Metropolitan Police Commissioner, who's in charge of trying to fix it. I realise they've got a massive problem. I always say to these people who support Just Stop Oil, and sometimes it's idiotically supporting that, like people like Gary Lineker, who are basically encouraging people to do this kind of thing. It's really holding up the day-to-day operations of the Metropolitan Police, isn't it? It is, and what's happening with those protesters is they're not letting ambulances through, they're not letting fire services through. So the impact isn't just on normal working people, it's also on the emergency services that they then need to call. Yeah. So the impact is I think it's too big a price to pay. Yeah. And whatever your politics, whoever you support, I'm not sure that I agree with the tactics that are being used. No, and I think that's a sensible way to put it. But the other problem for me is that, and we're seeing more and more of this, individuals, you know, private citizens, people who are in vehicles are getting more and more irate, more and more instances of them jumping out of the cars, trying to drag these people away. And there was a piece of footage yesterday from somewhere in London, not quite sure where the police officers were actually protecting the Just Stop Oil demonstrators who were sitting down. They were preventing irate sort of individuals, car drivers and lorry drivers, from getting at them to move them. And then you've got a real problem on your hands because you've got the police effectively protecting the lawbreakers against people who are just trying to get around and do their job. Police are literally caught in the middle with situations like that, because I did see the video of the guy who'd got onto the train at Canning Town or somewhere, being dragged off by the public. Yes. And you know, those are people who are trying to get into work. It's the early train, get into work to do their cleaning jobs, to do their rounds, to do whatever they do. And they are being disrupted by one individual who is selfish enough to affect people who are travelling by public transport. Yeah. You know, sometimes I don't understand the logic behind it. But it can't be right that the police are then going to protect somebody like that. You know, because if the police that I watched yesterday were at Canning Town that morning, they would have prevented the commuters from pulling him off the top of the train. The issue there is that police have a duty to prevent any breach of the peace, and if they feel that there might be a breach of the peace, as in a fight might break out, or somebody may get assaulted or hurt, they have no choices. Yeah. No, but surely then they have to make the judgment that the cause of the breach of the peace is the person sitting on the ground, so you remove the person sitting on the ground, surely. It's not as easy as that, because some of those people have been glued to the ground, and then you have to call in. I don't see that as a problem, to be honest. This is where the police service and us as taxpayers are paying for teams to go and unglue these individuals. But a lot of them, though, I mean, in this particular video, they weren't glued, because before the police started to protect them, some of them were being dragged off. They were literally just sitting there. Yeah. So, you know, I think the police have just got to be more robust. And I'm only saying that because that's the message I get from the viewers of this show. Police are bound by certain rules and regulations, and they have to follow those. Otherwise, those same protesters would then be suing the police for getting hurt, getting dragged off, I don't know, burns from the gravel or whatever it is. It just becomes ridiculous. It becomes absolutely crazy. Exactly right. Something's got to be done. Palm, thank you very much indeed. Palm Sandhu there giving us the lowdown on why the police just can't seem to do anything right these days. I don't think it's anybody's fault but theirs, to be honest. Now, do remember, if you're watching Talk TV at home, don't forget you can continue listening to the programme while you're in the car on Talk Radio. So if you are watching me right now and you go, look, I've got to get out, but I can't stop watching it because it's that good, you can get in the car and watch it. No. You can if you're not driving. But if you're driving, you can get in the car and listen to Talk Radio, because we're on multi-platforms now. Talk Radio, Talk TV, you can get it on the app, you can get it on YouTube, and if you are on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. This is Talk TV. Back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk TV. Dave says, hi Mike, firstly that lefty lawyer is one of the main problems with our immigration system. He's a fool, happily taking taxpayers' money to defend criminals. Now, on to my main reason for the text. Fair play for wearing the poppy. I'm a veteran of the 1st the Queen's Dragoons Guards and fully support the Royal British Legion poppy appeal. But like many others in the veterans community, we wish the Royal British Legion would use the millions they are sat on to do more work supporting veterans who are homeless and those suffering from PTSD. We feel that the Royal British Legion and our government needs to do a lot more. No one who has served the country should be living on the streets. Please help to make this stop. Dave, I could not agree with you more. Here's the problem. There's an awful lot of money that is collected by the 2022 Poppy Appeal. It is a fabulous appeal which happens every single year. And as I say, there's a great story in The Sun today involving two people, Bernard Morgan, who's 98 years of age, and he's pictured with somebody called Maya Reynard. Both of them have been helped by the Veterans Charity. And you're absolutely right to say that perhaps more could be done for veterans on the streets, and more is going to be done. We're going to be doing some special reports around Remembrance Sunday. We're going to be talking to a lot of veterans, and we're going to be trying to help as many people as we possibly can. But just have a listen to this. One of the things that the Poppy Appeal did pay for was for Bernard from Cheshire to return to Normandy to remember comrades killed in action in June 1944. And for Maya to go to the Invictus Games with her mum Sally, who's an ex-RAF corporal. She suffered a knee injury serving in Afghanistan and won a swimming silver at the event in the Netherlands. And it just really shows a beautiful picture here of a young girl who's just 6 years of age with Bernard, who's 98. And what a wonderful story and what a wonderful picture it is. And they're standing, of course, in front of the flowers of poppies in London here. And there's a 20% rise in requests from veterans over bills. 2,000 veterans secured a total of £10 million of debt relief, thanks to the Poppy Appeal. But we'll certainly do what we can, Dave, to make sure that everybody who needs help, who has been a veteran, does get it. And the Poppy Appeal, as I say, is something that you can help with that. Do as much as you can. And as I say, if you don't want to wear a poppy, you can still give them some money. It wouldn't do you any harm. Dean is in Oxford. Hi, Dean.
Hello, Mike. How are you?
Very well, sir. What can I do for you?
Well, I was just having to think about the immigration situation.
Yes.
And my wife's from Thailand, and I'd just like to discuss a little bit of how much it's cost me.
Yes.
In fees from the Home Office and lawyers' fees, because actually trying to do anything like that on your own is an absolute bloody nightmare, and it's a minefield. So I've employed immigration lawyers to do it, and it's probably cost me 8 or 9 grand over the 5 years, because it's a 5-year course to do it all, and you do your A1, A2, B1, life in the UK, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And that's probably cost another 5.5, 6 grand. Now we're doing our citizenship, which she gets on the 14th of November. So all in all, you're looking at 14, 15 grand. And when I see these people just coming over on boats, it basically makes me spit that I've done everything in the correct way, and you've got these lawyers who are making heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps of money out of us.
Yes.
Taxpayers' money.
Yeah, and laughing about it. I mean, it's all very well saying, I don't make as much money as you think I do, but you're still getting... I mean, how on earth is it possible for somebody to come here illegally and get funded, basically, to take the government to court? It makes no sense to me.
And I've been hemorrhaging money out of my backside, doing it the correct way, doing all the tests, A1, A2, B1 speaking, and the life in the UK. I pay for it all, and it's basically cost me a bleeding fortune.
Yeah, I know.
These geezer, I mean, get me over the coast in France with a big knife, and I'll just pop all the boats.
Yeah.
How simple can it be?
I know. It can't be that hard to stop it from happening, for heaven's sake. They just need to get a grip of it. Dean, thank you very much for your call. Tim's in Gospel. Hello, Tim.
Good morning, Mike. How you doing?
Very well, sir. What can I do for you?
I've got a slightly different angle from this migrant crisis.
Yes.
I served in the British Army. I did 3 tours of Afghanistan. 2 of the tours were in Helmand.
Right.
And I had Afghans working for me, interpreters.
Yeah.
They've all applied under the Arab scheme to come here.
Right.
They got left behind back in August.
Yeah, when the airlift was going on.
Yeah. One of them was actually caught up in the bomb blast, having been instructed to go to the airport. They finally managed to get out of Afghanistan by their own means, legally, getting the right visas to go into Pakistan and into Iran. They got under the Arab scheme. The government have looked after them. They brought them here. One of the guys with his family arrived in November.
Right.
The other 2 arrived in May and June of this year, and they've all been sat in hotels ever since.
Right.
They've got their work permits to work. One who's found a job as working in a pizzeria.
They've made the journey. They've been sort of nodded through, as it were, because they were entitled to do so. They can work, but what's the problem?
They've been stuck in hotels. They don't have an address to be able to, etc., etc. One of them, he is a qualified doctor.
Right.
His wife is a very experienced midwife.
Yeah.
He's been struggling at getting registered with the GMC.
Right.
And they're not doing anything.
The whole business seems to me to be stagnated in a quagmire where nothing moves. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah. And the problem is exacerbated by the illegal migrants coming in, being put up in hotels. Admittedly, they're in different hotels to the legal guys that have come in under the Arab scheme.
Yeah.
But because the system is so clogged up, they can't find anywhere to live. They can't move on. And although the local councils are saying, if you can find a house, then we'll assess it to whether it's suitable for their needs, whether we can afford to put you into it.
Right. So I mean, they want to work.
It's a crazy system.
But massively useless system, basically. There is no system, it seems to me, that nothing's working. Because presumably they're having to be funded as well, somehow. They're getting money when they would rather work for it.
Absolutely. I mean, the doctor, he's been trying since he arrived to get registered with a GMC. It's taken a couple of months for the GMC to actually send out the application form to him. He's got all that done, send it back, and he's waiting to get registered. Once he gets registered, he's got a job waiting for him down here in the Gosport area. They're stuck up in the north of the country. Before he arrived in the country, he was sat in Islamabad for 6 or 7 weeks.
Yeah.
We were talking with at the time it was the PGHQ, been working with the local MP to ask them if they could be located in the south, where we're desperate, absolutely desperate for doctors and midwives in this area. And they arrived in the country. The Home Office then sent them to the north of the country.
Yeah. I mean, the Home Office needs a serious root and branch. It needs just completely breaking up and breaking down and fixing. Listen, I've got to run. Tim, great call. Thank you very much indeed. Hope that situation gets solved. Nothing works. Let's get some news.
Discussing the big issues. Why was it so hard to establish the deputy leader was at a meeting with her colleagues? The callers, Alan in Grimsby. How you doing, Ross? Dave, thank you very much. Picking apart the big stuff. This simply does not wash. Join me, Ian Collins, every day at 1 p.m.
This is talkTV News.
Good morning, I'm Zora Suleiman. Some breaking news in the last half an hour. A woman who murdered and decapitated her friend has been jailed for life. Gemma Mitchell hit 67-year-old Mi Quen Chong over the head with a weapon at a London home in June last year. She's the first woman in the UK to have her sentence hearing broadcast live on TV. The judge described her as extremely devious.
You have shown absolutely no remorse, and it appears that you are in complete denial as to what you did, notwithstanding what, in my judgment, amounted to overwhelming evidence against you. The enormity of your crime is profoundly shocking.
The world's richest man, Elon Musk, now officially owns Twitter after completing his £38.1 billion takeover of the social media company. In his first move as the new boss, he reportedly fired a number of top executives. The Northern Ireland Secretary says he's extremely disappointed that politicians missed the deadline for restoring a devolved government. The region is now set for an assembly election before Christmas, and Chris Heaton-Harris says he'll be providing an update shortly because the people of Northern Ireland deserve a fully functioning devolved government. And Arsenal defender Pablo Mari has said that he was lucky as he prepares to undergo back surgery after being stabbed in a supermarket near Milan. The player, who's currently on loan to Monza, was shopping with his family during the attack, which left one person dead and at least 5 others injured. A 46-year-old suspect was detained by police at the scene. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to the Independent Republican Mike Graham right here on Talk TV. Lots going on. Incredible numbers of calls coming in. We will get to you as fast as we possibly can because we've got to speak about Prince Harry yet. We haven't done that. We've got to speak, of course, about the economy. Julian Jessop's coming up very shortly, independent economist, because Rishi Sunak has got several things on his plate that he needs to sort out, and we will get to that as well. Also, Henry Bolton's going to be here to talk some more about the plans to completely and utterly overhaul not just the immigration system, but the Home Office as well, because the Home Office is clearly not fit for purpose. You heard our last caller, Tim, there, saying, I'm sorry, nothing works. Even the people who are coming here legally from Afghanistan, who should be allowed to come here because they helped the British Army against the Taliban, and their lives genuinely would be in danger if they stayed there, and we owe them. Even that doesn't work, which is ludicrous and ridiculous, isn't it? Let's talk to Julian Jessop, because we know, for example, that the Halloween budget, which was due to be announced, of course, on Monday in the House of Commons, has now been moved back to November the 17th. Probably wisely, that would be said in my view. Rishi Sunak is apparently planning to extend and expand the windfall tax on energy companies. But the bigger question for me is, what's he going to do with the pensions triple lock? And I know lots of you are very interested in that. Let's find out from Julian what's happening. Julian, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, I mean, there's an awful lot on the plates combined of Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak. Probably sensible that they're not announcing whatever it is they're going to do on Monday. But those two big questions remain, don't they? What is going to happen with the triple lock? I don't know what government policy is on it anymore. He says he's sticking with the 2019 manifesto. Last week, Liz Truss said that the triple lock was staying. What do you think is going to happen with that?
Well, if I can start with a big picture, we seem to have gone from one extreme to the other. So under Truss and Kwarteng, big tax cuts, big increases in spending, particularly on energy price guarantees. And that unsettled the markets. But now we seem to have swung to the other extreme, which is, big tax increases, spending cuts, all on the basis of some pretty dodgy forecasts from the Office for Budget Responsibility for what the black hole in the public finances might be. I mean,
surely not the Budget of Responsibility, who were supposedly the ones that should have made the assessments when Kwasi Kwarteng made his mini-budget, because this is the point, isn't it? One of the reasons they bypassed it was because they didn't think that their predictions thus far had been worth very much.
Well, I think it was right to bypass the OBR if all they were going to do in that mini-budget a few weeks ago was simply the things they've already announced, so the energy price guarantee and the cancellation of the increases in national insurance and corporation tax. So the problem is, and this was a mistake that even Kwasi Kwarteng has now acknowledged, they went a lot further than that. Yeah. The additional cuts in income tax and the doubling down on Sunday when Kwasi Kwarteng basically said to the markets, I know you're worried, but I don't care. So that was the big mistake. If they had gone ahead with roughly what turns out to be the timetable that the new government is going to go for, in other words, a fiscal statement in late November with the blessing of the OBR, then I think things would have looked very different. But we are where we are. It does look like we're going to get bigger tax increases and bigger spending cuts than we really need.
And the question is, can the British public put up with bigger taxes and less money in their own pockets? And will that be something that backfires massively on Rishi Sunak?
Well, this I think is a real problem. I mean, the good news is that we do now have some political stability. We've got a Conservative Party leader that at least will last until Christmas and maybe until the next election. And you've got more stability in the market. So the backdrop is good. But I'm worried that the policy choices being made are now going to be the wrong ones. Doesn't sound like a very responsible thing to me.
Yeah, and that's the problem, isn't it? Because in the end, the belief is, and I don't know whether you share this, that by the time November 17th rolls around, the inflation rate might have improved. I'm not quite sure what the science is for that, and I know when I say the word science, I use that word very advisedly. But could it be possible that the sort of environment economically might not be as bad on November the 17th?
Well, this is the problem. I mean, one of the ironies is that by delaying the budget for a few weeks, they're probably going to have better numbers to work with. And that's partly because market expectations for interest rates have fallen and, some credit to Rishi Sunak there. But it's also because the price of natural gas in the wholesale markets has plummeted as well. And that's a really big part of the jigsaw too. So I think that illustrates the danger of relying too much on these spuriously accurate numbers. 1 minute it's 20 billion, next minute it's 50 billion, then it's 40 40 billion, and then setting tax policy now on the basis of a guess, frankly, about where you think the public finances might be in 3 or 4 years' time, I think doesn't make any sense at all. And there is a risk that we end up with policy that tips us into a deeper recession that we really need to have, in which case I think Rishi Sunak has to pay a price in the polls.
Yes. And what about the triple lock? I mean, how affordable or not is it for them? And if they do wed themselves to it, what will they do to make up for it, if you like, in the Treasury?
Well, first of all, I think in the longer term, the triple lock on the state pension has to go. I think it is very generous, in particular the way that pensioners always get, the best available option, including an increase in line with average earnings, means that the state pension is always just going to keep rising as a share of national income. So in the longer term, it's not affordable. But is it the right thing to cut now? I'm not sure. Pensioners amongst many groups who are struggling with the cost of living.
I can tell you what the people who listen to this show will tell you, and they absolutely must keep up with inflation, because the one area where you cannot really have very much breathing space is if you are taking a pension.
Yeah, and I think that's actually even more true for those who are on non-pensioner benefits, who I think should definitely get an increase in line with inflation as well. But I think the broader point here is that it's the wrong time to be penny pinching. Yes, I'm sure you can find some savings in the pensions budget or the welfare budget, but to do that now, when the economy is sliding into recession, when people are very rightly worried about the cost of living over the next few months in particular, I think that sends a really negative signal for consumer confidence, and that could actually end up making the problem worse. If you don't have growth in the economy, and this is one of the things I think Truss was absolutely right on, then the long-term outlook for the public finances is worse rather than better.
Yes, well, I think it's all going to be pretty painful, to be honest. Julian, thank you very much indeed. Julian Jessup there with his latest forecast on what it will be like to be listening on November the 17th to the new budget and the new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt. Let's talk to Gary, who's in the Wirral, wants to talk about the Albanian situation. Gary, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Fantastic show.
Thank you, sir.
I love the way you sorted that barrister out. That was brilliant.
How condescending and pompous was he?
Oh, man. Do you know, and they're all the same, aren't they?
They've got not a care in the world for anybody who wants to make an honest living in this country.
They just money. Puppies do.
Yeah.
On a legal basis. Rubbish. I wish I had got my daughter some legal aid.
Yeah.
Go to court.
Listen, see if you can stay in one spot, Gary. Your line's not great.
Oh, sorry. Let's move over here out to the window. Basically, the Albanians, they're coming from the country that's producing more cocaine than anything else, and you can imagine why. Because Britain is floating on cocaine at the moment. It's there.
Well, it's the cocaine capital of Europe, Britain, isn't it?
Oh, my God, it's unbelievable. I work in Liverpool at the moment, mate, and it's just ridiculous. You can see them doing deals here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
I drive around most of the day, and that's how I come and listen to the show. Kyle this morning was fantastic.
Yeah.
Brilliant the way he's sort of trying to sort stuff out. But the other thing that gets my goat as well, mate, is MPs say, oh, yeah, we go and talk to our constituents, we do this and we do that. I have never seen an MP in 30 years of where I live. Not one of them. Not a Liberal, not a Labour, not a Conservative.
I've never had an MP knock on my door, ever. I've had a couple of Jehovah's Witnesses and somebody with a parcel for the bloke next door. That's all I ever get.
You just say Catholic and you go...
The good man. Listen, Gary, thank you very much indeed. Gary in the Wirral. There's a drug problem in this country. The reason there's a drug problem is because there's an awful lot of drugs being supplied and an awful lot of drug gangs, and you don't have to take my word for it. You ask anyone in the prison system, what is the biggest population per nationality of people in British prisons, and you will find that Albania has got, by far and away, a huge number of people in our British prisons, and they're all in for drug offences and gun offences. And you look at many of the cases up and down the country. You can go to Newcastle, you can go to Chester, you can go to Norwich, you can go to any number of cities and Crown Courts and Magistrates Courts in this country, and many of the people who are being done for drug possession and drug dealing are Albanian drug gangs. It's that simple. Just join the dots, people, will you? Especially those people who are making money out of it in the legal profession. This is talkTV. Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk TV. It is a poppy day, of course, and we'll be talking some more about that. Apparently some people have been having a go at me on TikTok. We'll be telling you more about that later on. TikTok is an unusual place, a place filled with people much younger than me doing things which I don't really understand. Of course, you would expect me to be a factor, a point of interest there. But we'll see what's going on. We'll bring that to you very shortly. We've been talking this morning an awful lot about the migrant problem. The front page of the Times this morning, Prime Minister seeks deal to curb channel crossings. That headline could literally have been read from about 2012, 2013, 2014. You get the picture. I mean, there's nothing new here. Henry Bolton's here. Henry, very nice to see you again. You're a busy man at the moment. I watched you on Jeremy Kyle the other night, offering to help the government for free, basically, to sort this problem out. We're hearing this morning that there's ideas of possibly putting up tented cities to house people. We're hearing from Manston that there's 3,000 people sleeping on the floors of a place that's meant to hold 1,000. You know, people running in and out of people's residences down on the south coast, demanding phones and demanding, you know, with menaces. Unbelievable situations going on. Finally, the sort of the main body of the media is picking this story up. But I don't know if you heard Jeremy Kyle this morning. Roger Gale, MP, a man who is not one of my favourites, it has to be said, threatening to cut the conversation short if Jeremy stopped using emotive words about people being illegal. I mean, what is wrong with these politicians that they won't accept that this is one of the biggest issues in the country and has been for many years, and they need to fix it?
Indeed, they do. And what we're seeing is exactly what I predicted we'd see when the numbers got unmanageable in terms of the administration. Right. We would see the government increasing its knee-jerk, almost panic-driven responses to manage what's actually arriving here. Yeah. This is the genesis, if you like, of the idea of putting tented migrant camps in city parks in London. It's utterly nuts.
Exactly, because we can see what happens if you do that. Have a look at Paris. Have a look at Brussels.
It's going to... and it's also, I mean, you know... legal, illegal. These people, you are putting them in a place where disease and infection is going to be rife. Yeah. You've got to manage the law and order aspect of it. You've got to provide food, the logistics, and so on. It's nuts. If they're going to do that, and let's be honest, we've got so many people coming in now that the government somehow has to play catch-up and get ahead of the game and demonstrate some forward-leaning initiative. Yeah. They're not doing that so far. But to do that, they need to be building refugee camps on Salisbury Plain or some such. There are many solutions to this, but this is just an example of how absolutely chaotic the Home Office is.
If I might be so bold as to suggest that building anything to house people here is the wrong approach.
I agree.
Because the right approach surely is to stop them from coming.
I agree. And all I'm saying is that we have now two problems. We've got the number of people who are actually here and sorting that out, and we've got the flow that is still coming at us. So that both of those things have to be addressed. Now, what I'm afraid of is that we've got such limited capacity in the Home Office to understand these problems and the complexity and, a military term, lines of operation. You know, the military are used to running multiple lines of operation, each with their own objectives and so on, concurrently. And a military commander is used to and trained and experienced in managing that leading that whole process, making sure it's on the rails. We've clearly got nobody of that ilk in the Home Office, and it's needed. So we've got to work both angles. I see that again, it's in the Times, the Home Office, that you mentioned it, looking to amend the agreement with France. Well, fine, that I have no objection to that. Maybe it'll have some effect, but we actually don't need little sort of individual projects here. What we need is a proper set of strategic objectives from the government that then drives a planning process which has cohesion across the whole piece. This isn't about migrants here. It's not about the legal bit. It's not about France. It's not about the RNLI. It's not about organised crime. It's about all of the above. And if you don't take it in the round like that, take a strategic view. I mean, political intent leads to political or strategic objectives. Strategic objectives lead to planning processes. I mean, it's more complex than that. But without that clarity of leadership and vision, nothing else is going to be driven.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Because it's almost as though you need somebody to sit you down and go, look, what's the objective here? If the objective is to stop them coming, then there are certain things that you need to do. Correct. You need to make it less friendly for when they get here. You need to make it more difficult for them to get here. You need to make it more punishable when they do arrive illegally, as the Australians did. You know, the fact is, clearly people are coming here because, one, they know if they land here, there's a pretty good chance they'll never leave. They'll never get kicked out. Well, you know that 4% of cases are being looked at by the Home Office. The Home Office is purely and simply not fit for purpose. No. And we don't seem to have a clue.
We haven't. And the other problem that we are just about to face, I would predict, is that Rishi Sunak now and the Home Office want to process asylum claims more rapidly. Now, I'm all for that. But if that's not done properly, what we will find is that the immigration staff who will be paid bonuses, I understand now, that's the idea, for processing for asylum
for
claims.
Doing their job, you get a bonus.
What they'll be doing is just rubber stamping them, and they'll just fly through. So we will end up with people who absolutely no way, no how should have an asylum claim granted, simply being granted it so that they can play catch-up with the numbers.
I mean, my understanding of the way it's working at the moment with these people traffickers is if you somehow, you know, your attempt to get to Britain fails because of either the weather or because you get deported, unusually, I mean, that's a pretty unusual situation, they just keep trying, and if you keep coming back and coming back and coming back, eventually you'll get there.
Yeah, indeed. And you will. And at the end of the day, Mike, what's going to happen is they're going to land on a beach somewhere like Dungeness and do a runner.
Yeah.
And
as we saw this week.
And they'll just disappear.
Yeah.
As we've seen
I can tell you for sure, knowing that area as I do, and you know it well as well, there's so many parts of the southeast coast of this country where people can land a boat without having any border force anywhere near them. Pet Level is one. You can go all the way down to Camber Sands, anywhere you like, up to Rye. The whole place is flat as a pancake.
Absolutely. And we know this has happened because we know that migrants have been spotted inland, having landed.
Well, you know, my kids have told me stories of how they've walked through, where they live in Sussex, it's not that far from the coast. There's plenty of woods and stuff where they all go and hang out, and they find people living there. Indeed. There's people living in the woods in parts of Sussex, right? And they're not homeless people. No. They're people who have come here from another country.
But it's not just the people, and I know that this is the big part of it at the moment, and it's representative of a systemic problem in government and the way we manage our borders and immigration. Right. But bear in mind that the largest group of people coming in, as we've discussed before, are Albanians.
Yes.
Albanians are Europe's biggest cocaine traffickers, biggest heroin traffickers, and biggest firearms
biggest
traffickers.
People traffickers as well.
Biggest people traffickers.
How is it possible, for example, I was talking to this lawyer earlier who didn't seem to quite grasp what I was getting at. How is it possible for people to come from a country which is in NATO, as far as I'm aware, which is part of Europe, so is not actually, from another continent? How can they come here and claim to be refugees from a country which is not at war?
Well, indeed. Just to finish my previous point, just very briefly, Mike, the thing is, it's not just people coming over. All cocaine and all heroin in this country is imported across our borders. So we're not just talking about people. And the cost at the moment is around 15 billion a year to look after the migrants that are here, the asylum seekers and migrants that process that. The cost to the taxpayer of the health cost, the policing cost and so on related to the cocaine and heroin trades is about 21 billion. So we're talking about, if Rishi Sunak wants to close the hole in his budget, deal with this problem. And then you've closed the hole in your budget.
But closing the cocaine smuggling business is not possible because one thing we know is that nobody's ever been able to do that.
I agree, but we can't stop the Albanian criminals who are actually trafficking.
Well, we certainly shouldn't. We shouldn't be encouraging them to come here.
No,
that's
we shouldn't.
Sure.
But to go back to your question, Mike. We've got a returns agreement with Albania. The problem is identifying. Number one is identifying them because they play a game, the Albanians. There are 4 areas that Albanians live in that region. Albania itself, Kosovo, the Republic of Northern Macedonia and southern Serbia. Now, our immigration officials are utterly unable to identify people. If somebody says they're from Kosovo or Albania, whatever, they're unable to identify whether or not that's the truth.
Right.
Now, there are ways of getting around that. In 2006, we brought Macedonian police officers to the UK to conduct interviews of people, and they were saying, "You're not from Kosovo. You're from Tetovo in Macedonia, and I can tell by your dialect."
Right.
We don't have that skill. We don't have
because
that
initially the people who came from Kosovo were coming from Kosovo as a result of the Balkans War, as a result of ethnic cleansing, and so that was seen as humanitarian. But of course, funnily enough, the other Albanians have gone, "Oh, we'll just say we're from Kosovo."
Well, indeed. And actually, that war, I was there. I was there, embedded with the Serbian security forces at the time as an observer for London and Washington. And that war was actually, yes, the Serbs were bang out of order in lots of respects.
Yeah.
And we're going back nearly, 25 years.
Well, there were no good
now.
guys in that war.
There weren't. But it was almost triggered by Albanian organised crime in Kosovo and the way that that confrontation played out, as well as the politics. But we should be returning them. There is a returns agreement. But the other problem is a legal one where they are claiming that they are being trafficked and they are victims of human trafficking. That's a conversation in itself. But again, the lack of knowledge and training for the immigration officers who are dealing with this means that they have no clue whether or not this claim of trafficking is valid or not.
We're acting literally like saps. We are so fascinated with this. We could go on forever, but we're out of time. We are being taken advantage of. It's bloody obvious to me. It's obvious to Henry. It's obvious to all of you. Why can't the government fix it? For God's sake, get on with it. This is Talk TV.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 12.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. A woman who murdered and decapitated her friend has been sentenced to life in prison live on TV. Gemma Mitchell hit 67-year-old Mi Quen Chong over the head with a weapon at her London home in June last year. She's the first woman in the UK to have her sentencing broadcast live on TV. The judge described her as extremely devious.
You have shown absolutely no remorse, and it appears that you are in complete denial as to what you did, notwithstanding what, in my judgment, amounted to overwhelming evidence against you. The enormity of your crime is profoundly shocking.
The world's richest man, Elon Musk, now officially owns Twitter after completing his £38.1 billion takeover of the social media company. In his first move as the new boss, he reportedly fired a number of top executives. Musk later tweeted saying the bird is free. He was given a deadline of today to close the deal to avoid going to trial after the company sued him for trying to back out of his original deal made back in April. The Northern Ireland Secretary says he's extremely disappointed that politicians missed the deadline for restoring a devolved government. The region is now set for Assembly election before Christmas. And Chris Heaton-Harris says he'll be providing an update shortly because the people of Northern Ireland deserve a fully functioning devolved government. Member of the Northern Ireland Assembly for the Alliance Party, Nick Matheson, has told us an election won't solve anything, though.
We're going to have an election within the next number of weeks. It will, in all likelihood, not change the outcome, and we will still have one party exercising a veto. So we think that the reform is the essential part here to allow the next largest party to step in, join the government, and get on with actually sorting out the major challenges that Northern Ireland faces.
Arsenal defender Pablo Mari has said he was lucky as he prepares to undergo back surgery after being stabbed in a supermarket near Milan. The player, who's currently on loan to Monza, was shopping with his family during the attack, which left one person dead and at least 5 others injured. A 46-year-old suspect was detained by police at the scene. And a British kayaker who capsized whilst crossing the channel has been rescued by fishermen after clinging onto a float for 2 days. It's reported he survived by eating seaweed and mussels until he was picked up by a crew from the Netherlands. He's been taken to hospital suffering from hypothermia. Well, that's the latest. Now time for today's weather with Lucy Martin.
Times World News sponsors talkTV weather.
Hello, it remains changeable into the weekend with spells of rain, some blustery winds, and it's looking mild as well. It's a mild start to the day this morning with some wet weather in the west. We've seen rain moving in overnight, and as we go through the day today, it's going to work its way north and east. There'll be some heavy bursts in there, particularly for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. There are some Met Office weather warnings in place for the rain, the potential for some disruption, some tricky driving conditions, localised flooding, that sort of thing. But once that rain clears, it's looking like a decent afternoon with some good spells of sunshine, perhaps 1 or 2 showers in the west. The winds will be blustery with that rain, but tending to ease through the afternoon, with temperatures reaching a high of 20 degrees Celsius in the south. And then as we go through the evening and overnight, it's looking fairly quiet. There'll be some clear spells, again 1 or 2 showers out towards the north and west. And again, it's looking mild overnight. Into the early hours, we see rain pushing into the south, and that's a sign of things to come through Saturday. On Saturday, we'll see a spell of rain pushing its way north, be mild in the south and east, with temperatures again reaching the low 20s. For Sunday, a spell of further rain pushes in from the west. There could be the odd thundery burst. And don't forget, the clocks go back on Sunday as well.
Times World News sponsors talkTV weather.
I'm Vanessa Felds. Join me every weekday from 4 till 7 on talkTV.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on talkTV. So much going on, of course, because we are at the end of yet another week. It's Friday. We're going into clocks changing weekend, by the way. Who knew that it'd be so warm? Apparently it's going to be about 22 degrees in London. That may not be the case, of course, in other parts of the country, because whenever people go, don't you see how warm it is? Don't you know what's happening? Yeah, well, it's not that warm everywhere, I have to tell you. And certainly when I lived in Scotland, it was a lot less warm than it is down here. Coming up, of course, if you're watching talkTV at home, don't forget you can continue to listen to the programme while you're in the car on Talk Radio if you're out and about, if you're going out for a run, if you're going out cycling even. You could still listen. Also, if you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to YouTube, because watching us on YouTube is a great thing, but you can click subscribe so you never miss any of the big interviews or debates, because we put out a lot of the interviews and debates that we do separately as YouTube clips, and we will be doing that with our good friend, the lawyer that we spoke to, Dr. Chel Van, earlier on in the day. Created quite a storm, it has to be said. The police are entrenched with woke ideology, says Paula. It's gone too far to change quickly. My view is that ex-service people who wish to join should go to the top of the list, not university students with no life experience. And Mass says this: I really hope talkTV keep on about the illegal immigrants every day and don't stop in for a few days. It really is one of the biggest problems in the UK right now, draining the country dry of money. Well, I think you'll find that we at talkTV have been relentlessly covering this story. Only now that everybody else has picked it up are we being accused of only occasionally doing it. We've done it for years. I've been telling you about this Albanian problem for a very long time. But let's talk about something completely different now, because Mark Bukowski is here, media PR guru. We got the news yesterday that Prince Harry's long-awaited book is finally coming out. Penguin Random House are publishing it. It's called Spare, and it's going to be an exploration of Harry's journey from a royal family member to grieving son to winning overall because love triumphs in the end. There we are. Mark, very good afternoon to you.
Morning, Mike. Well, afternoon, Mike.
It's afternoon already, yes, I'm sorry. The long-awaited book, it is long-awaited, it's 28 quid. It's quite expensive. It's a funny time to release a book, though, isn't it, in January?
Yeah, I thought so. I think that the key book buying period is round about now, October through to Christmas, you know, for all those gifts that you can't think about buying something. Why not spend 28 quid on getting the Harry book? So that would suggest to me that there has been a dialogue. I mean, maybe he has tried to re-edit it, regret some of the things he said since the passing of his grandmother. Maybe that's delayed it, but it doesn't strike me as the prime time to sell books. And let's face it, with all the various things that they put out, it's about time these things started to deliver financially for the people who've paid the advances and done the subscription deals with them.
Well, there's an awful lot of money involved. I mean, he's said to be paid somewhere around about 25 million for the book. He's giving about 2 million of it away to charity. Fair enough. I'm not going to criticise him for making a living. I guess that's what he wants to do. But it's not... I mean, the front page of the Mail today suggests that the royal family may not like what's in it.
Well, he's reverting to type. I don't think there's anything that he's done or she has done in that sense that has paid much respect to the Queen, and certainly not very empathetic to his family. And they've got to keep driving, you know, the point of difference, and they've got to get these messages out all the time, you know, about the mental health struggles and about how difficult it was being the spare, and in terms of sort of playing up and building that foundation, that audience, those sort of people who respond to him, that they can further sell ideas to going forward.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he talks about it being his words, his story, but it's actually been ghostwritten. So, I mean, there's nothing I like more than to read somebody in his own words, having had it dictated to by somebody else.
Well, I mean, you know, one could argue that it is his words. They've been maybe interpreted by a ghost. They've
just been put into some logical order.
Well, yeah, or maybe that's it. Maybe there needs to be some arbiter in it to say, oh, do you really want to say that? Or should you be saying that? It probably is a balance by having a ghostwriter involved, but I suspect it won't be somebody offering that sense of critique or being a critical best friend. It will be someone who will just, capture what he says. I mean, look, this is going to be fireworks. But do you know what, Mike? Sooner or later, we're just going to run out of interest in the usual sort of diatribe, because it's a same old, isn't it? And how long can we carry on getting people, even the generation they want to pitch to, being interested in the same narrative. There needs to be something new and fresh, and just attacking or perhaps, and trying to undermine the royal family is just getting a little bit boring.
Yeah, well, it is really. But, I mean, there's probably plenty of people in America that want to hear these kind of platitudes from the likes of Meghan, who says things like, always be true to yourself. And, and they'll pay money to listen to her telling them that. And it's kind of like, this literally is garbage, and you could have made it up yourself and read it back to yourself, and it wouldn't have made any difference to your life.
Well, you've got to stand back slightly and consider, what they're trying to do. I mean, they're trying to create this sort of organisation, foundation, family group, whatever you call, to do, good stuff around the world, whatever that is, around the environment and mental health and all the other things that you label. So you do need to find an audience outside this country, because I don't think there is an audience for them. They just generate more and more negative headlines. But in America and across the globe, there is a definitive interest in what Harry and Meghan say, and we must never forget that. We mustn't be complacent to the fact that we judge it from the lens we're looking at through the mainstream media in the UK. There is a lot of people out there who are very sympathetic to him, and you know what? You noticed it. At the time of the funeral and the mourning and whatever, there was still a lot of people who love to see Harry part of the royal family. They'd rather be him inside the palace, as it were, than outside with this geosymmetric dome sort of barking out about sort of modern woke issues.
Yeah, no, I get that. But imagine with this kind of investment from the publishing house, they will expect a full round of interviews to be made possible for him. I don't know how he'll do that, but you would imagine, can you imagine, for example, him appearing on Piers Morgan's show? Probably not. Would he appear on Graham Norton's show, maybe?
Oh, God, this is about global sales. I think this will be the chat show circuit across the world, and to pick up the numbers. So America comes first, and then key interviews, in other territories. And, of course, people will want him in UK. There'll be specials being pulled together, and there'll be all sorts of deals, because there has to be a very sophisticated marketing campaign around this. And maybe they've chosen to have a full, fresh go at it after Christmas, although I don't know what money will be left in people's pockets after Christmas to spend how much money there is.
Well, I'm not sure we'll have much before Christmas, to be honest. I think it's going to be the Christmas of the short corn for a lot of people.
Well, you're absolutely right, and I don't think the luxury of spending money on a book is high on the priorities this year. People are.
Well, I personally will not be bankrolling Prince Harry in any way, shape, or form. If he wants to send me a free book, I'll probably use it to keep the door open.
Well, I always wait for these things to turn up in pound shops. And you get a deal, But look, going back to that point about promotion, this is what's going to be interesting, Mike. Is really the noise that will have to be generated, not just in traditional media, not just in TV and radio across the world, but in social as well. So it's got to have controversy. It's got to have clickbait. So I suspect the royal family won't like it, but it'd be interesting to see how they deal with it.
Yes.
And if and ignore it.
And they've already kind of slightly pivoted on the Netflix deal, haven't they? They've now issued a statement saying, well, obviously the Netflix documentary is about us, but it's a story perhaps not as we would have it told. So they're already kind of trying to go, they might have done a few things that we didn't want them to do. Therefore, if it does come out that it's a bit horrible towards the royal family, they can say, well, that was what they did. We didn't do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many people actually believe that. Look,
I don't.
We're the audience. We're the audience. Here we are talking about it. It definitely does generate interest. In whatever you feel about it. It's a divisive debate. There's fans for it. There's more people against it in some ways. But it is a conversation that will go around the world. And that noise, that publicity will generate sales.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we shall see. They're not going away anytime soon. Hopefully, maybe by the end of 2023, they might have worked out that they've got enough money to live for the rest of their lives, and maybe they'll stop whining and actually go and enjoy it.
Never enough, Mike. Never enough.
I'm like, you never have enough as you've got. That's true. Mark, thank you very much indeed. Mark Bukowski there on the dreaded Harry book, which is coming out in January. 28 quid. Why would you give this guy money? He's got 30 million left to him by his mother. He's already made 100 million from Netflix. What sort of maniac would you have to be to spend any money buying this bloke's book? Let's talk to Gwen in Essex. Gwen, very good afternoon to you.
Hello, Mike.
Are you going to spare 28 quid for the poor Prince Harry to help him through his difficult life?
Most certainly am not.
Can you do something? Your phone sounds very strange, Gwen. Are you holding your hand over it or something?
No, is that better?
No, that's worse.
Oh,
yeah.
What's that?
Well, no, that's not good at all. Can we get you back? We'll call you back. We'll try and get you on a better line. I read a few months ago, says Judy, that if Prince Harry's book was published around November time, it would clash with another possible bestseller written by Michelle Obama. I wonder if that, coupled with Harry's recent doubts, is the reason for his book being delayed. Well, I think the problem is, right, they probably worried they want to make it a big event. So a lot of big books come out around Christmas time, and if they bring it out at the same time as that, it will just get lost, maybe. Elizabeth is in Pembrokeshire. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hello, how are you?
Very well indeed. What can I do for you?
I'm calling about the migrant crisis.
Yes.
And I wanted to let you know about a situation I encountered about, 5-6 years ago.
Right.
I was in the process of relocating from Dubai.
Right.
And the lady that came to see me from the company was an Indian lady, and we got chatting, where you going, blah, 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 UK, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And it turned out that her dream was to move to the UK. And I said, oh, OK, why do you want to do that? And she listed off just a massive list of benefits that she would be entitled to if you moved to the UK. And I said, well, I'm really sorry, but I honestly don't think that your understanding is correct. That's just not right. And she completely of the misunderstanding that you could get so many benefits by just turning up and arriving in the UK.
Blimey.
So it's not a surprise, really, that so many people think that it's an easy target to come and live here.
I don't think there's any doubt about that, because so many people want to come here. I mean, we hear all the time, don't we, from these bozos in America that Britain's a racist country. Oh, yeah? Well, why does everybody want to come and live here, then?
Absolutely. I mean, we're one of the most welcoming nations across the world.
Yes. Unbelievable. Well, listen, Elizabeth, thank you very much for making the call. Elizabeth's in Pembrokeshire, saying that she's been told that basically, and everybody knows this to be true, that many people from different countries in the world want to come to Britain because they know that they will be accepted here because it's not a racist country. They know that they'll get help if they need it because they're too poor to get a house or get benefits. And it is a soft touch, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry to say that. Yes, it would be nice if we could help all the people that want help, but we can't. It's that simple. We need to help our own people who are already here. And that also includes people that may have come here from elsewhere. It's not a bottomless pit. The Treasury doesn't have any money. And they're going to tax us more to pay for more people to come who don't have anything. Great. Doesn't sound like a plan to me. This is talkTV. Back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here at Talk TV. Friday is looming. The weekend is looming. The clocks go back on Saturday night. Don't forget, it is Poppy Day as well. So you can get your poppy today if you wish, or if you don't wish, do what you want. Try and give them some money anyway. It's always a good cause. Ian Williams is here, former correspondent, of course, for Channel 4 News and the Sunday Times. Expert in Chinese affairs, author of Every Breath You Take, China's New Tyranny. Also The Spectator as well. Welcome.
Good to be back.
Nice to see you. I haven't seen you since the old the days of the mourning for the Queen, I think. It was the last time I saw you.
That's right, when we were discussing China's will they come or won't they? And they did in the end.
Yes, they did, but they didn't come in the form of the main man, I suppose, right?
No, but he was a pretty close aide of Xi.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff to talk about this morning. Let's start off with the lockdown as Beijing revisits COVID, something we never thought they would do.
Yep, it's back, like one of those monsters that you cannot slay, that's got a momentum and a life of its own.
Yes.
Not surprising, really, because at the Congress, the Communist Party shindig last weekend, Xi Jinping declared that there would be no wavering, that this was a people's war on the virus. And, whereas you had Mao with all those red guards waving their little red books. You've now got the white guards, all these white-clad hazmat-suited zealots waving their little vials and swabs.
When we spoke before, there were those videos of people holding each other at sort of literally not arm's length, but even longer than arm's length. They had those weird poles, didn't they, where they were sort of holding people back.
That's right, and I mean we've seen some incredible stuff, and it's back. And the latest figures I've seen is something like 28 cities across China have some form of lockdown. That's involving 200 odd million people. It's back in Wuhan, which of course is where it all started. Right. iPhone City, Zhengzhou, this vast complex where Apple makes half its phone has been effectively shut down after a handful of cases in the factory.
Right. So they're behaving as they used to behave, as opposed to taking a different view and saying, well, we now know perhaps better than that.
Yeah, there's no question of China saying we're going to learn to live with it like the rest of the world. They're still into eradicating it, but of course they're in a bind. Xi's in a corner because Chinese vaccines are not effective, and he won't allow the import of more effective foreign vaccines.
Right. And as far as the Apple situation is concerned, I'd heard that Apple were moving quite a lot of their production from China back to the US, partly because of the cost of energy, partly because of the cost of shipping as well, and also because they thought after everything that's happened, they wanted to be slightly less reliant on production outside of the US.
They do, but they'll never say that publicly because they're terrified there'd be a backlash against them. Because they are very dependent on China, both for sales and in terms of all their factories being built there. But this is an example of the dislocation, the risks. And in fact, the new iPhone, I mean, this factory in Chengdu makes half the world's iPhones, but the new one, the iPhone 14, a lot of those are now being made in India. So they're trying to diversify away from China. It's all about resilience now. It's no longer about the cheapest place to produce it.
They don't want to be held to ransom, in other words. Fascinating video has come our way, which you can talk us through once we get it up on the old TV screen. It's showing a sort of intergovernmental problem, it seems to me. But, I mean, only in China would you see something like this. I don't know if you can see it now. It's on the screen. There's a huge hammer and sickle. There's a huge collection of Chinese officials. It looks as though one man is being removed, effectively. Tell us what's happening.
Well, this is Hu Jintao, and he was the predecessor to Xi Jinping. I mean, he ruled China for 10 years. I mean, this is an important guy in the Communist Party food chain.
He's sitting to Xi's left, isn't he?
He is, and he's being forced to his feet, and they're trying to get him to leave. He doesn't want to leave. Here he taps Xi on the shoulder, has a word with him. Xi nods perfunctorily, doesn't even acknowledge him, doesn't even turn, and the guy is led out of the hall. It's an extraordinary scene. Well, the speculation that maybe the guy was sick, that's the line that Chinese media are peddling. But, of course, the other explanation is that this was a very public humiliation of a man who represented everything that Xi doesn't. Under Hu Jintao, China was a more collective form of leadership. It was a more open country. And now, of course, you've effectively got one-man rule. You've got a guy that's setting himself up for a job for life, and he's surrounded himself with flunkies, with loyalists.
And the two people leading him out, of course, wearing masks, it would appear. And presumably he hasn't been seen since, has he?
No, but there's a lot of speculation because he's
I mean, you shouldn't be laughing, really, but it's such an unusually different way of doing things.
It is, but often tyranny and the ridiculous and both sides of the same coin. There's a fine line sometimes between the two, and in China you see that a lot, and you shouldn't laugh when someone disappears, but it is so...
It's so weird. Similarly, I remember watching a video once of Vladimir Putin, who was visiting some kind of big complex industrial building where they were supposed to be producing something. It was supposed to be a private company, but it was obviously under the auspices of nationalisation. And there was a guy who was being forced to sign something, and his hand was shaking so much because clearly he was worried that whatever he was signing was probably his own death warrant, and he had to give the pen, and the pen didn't work. Putin gave another pen, and it was chilling to watch, but kind of bizarre in its way.
It is, but you're seeing a similar thing, because when you have that concentration of power in one man, everybody wants to tell the emperor what he wants to hear.
Right.
And there's no one to blame anymore.
Right.
And the difficulty is, some people say, oh, you know, this shows China is stable, you've got this strong leader. But I don't go along with that, because not only is there no one left to blame, but there was a kind of system of succession that you went after 10 years. That's gone. So it could well be that when you get round to replacing Xi, it's going to be a whole lot more messy and destabilising.
Well, maybe someday two men in masks will come for him.
I think that's quite... I think the likelihood of that is quite high.
Finally, let's talk about the secret police stations in the UK, because we saw that terrible incident in Manchester where a protester was kind of dragged inside what was effectively the consulate of China and beaten up. What's this story about?
Yeah, well, that example of that beating up, of course, and there's still no really firm action against the Chinese diplomats involved. But no, this story emerged through Safeguard Defenders, which is an NGO, a human rights NGO, that obtained a database from a local police authority in China, which detailed secret police stations alleged in about 30 different countries. Now, a lot of them were in this country. When people went to investigate, it turned out some were restaurants, some were real estate companies, and it seemed they were more like front organisations, a post office box, a telephone. But the more worrying and chilling thing is they were part of this system which we know has existed under the Communist Party, through which they pressure dissidents. They say we're out to get fraudsters, we're out to get criminals, but you know, that's a pretty wide definition in China, because they define anybody that opposes the Communist Party as a criminal or a fraudster. And in fact, just in the last few days, I was talking to some recently arrived Hong Kong exiles here, activists, and they were telling me that they're actually quite frightened about being watched, about being spied upon, about people gathering information on them. And that
because many of them will have families back in Hong Kong.
Exactly, and one person I spoke to has actually cut his links with his family in Hong Kong to protect them. And they're very worried. And when these reports came out, I mean, they have urged the authorities to be more vigilant. And we just hope that they are more vigilant than we've seen so far in the Manchester incident.
Absolutely. Ian, we're out of time, sadly, but fascinating stuff. We'll see you again soon for another update on things. As we haven't really had a chance to ask you about this, we'll do it next time. Rishi Sunak and his relationship with China and how that's all going to go. But we've got more to do. We're going to talk to Morgan Schondelmeyer, Head of External Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute, why the Home Office has to be broken up. Also, there's a bit of a row going on TikTok. I should be addressing that as well. This is talkTV.
Join me, Jeremy Kyle, Monday to Thursday at 7, when I'll be taking a common-sense approach to the stories that really do matter to you. And you know me, gang, I don't shy away from difficult conversations, so nothing is off limits. So if you're a free thinker and you want a show that reveals the truth behind today's headlines with absolutely no agenda, join me on Jeremy Kyle Live. It's on Monday to Thursday at 7 right here on talkTV.
This is talkTV News.
Good afternoon, I'm Kate Partridge. A woman who murdered and decapitated her friend has been sentenced to life in prison live on TV. Gemma Mitchell hit 67-year-old Mi Quen Chong over the head at her London home in June last year. She then forged her will in an attempt to steal £700,000. The 38-year-old is the first woman in the UK to have her sentencing broadcast live on television, in which the judge described her as extremely devious.
You have shown absolutely no remorse, and it appears that you are in complete denial as to what you did, notwithstanding what, in my judgment, amounted to overwhelming evidence against you. The enormity of your crime is profoundly shocking.
The world's richest man, Elon Musk, now officially owns Twitter after completing his £38.1 billion takeover of the social media company. In his first move as the new boss, he reportedly fired a number of top executives. Musk later tweeted, saying the bird is free. Rishi Sunak has insisted the Tory party is now united during his first public visit as Prime Minister. Speaking after meeting staff at Croydon University Hospital, he dismissed suggestions officials warned against him bringing back Suella Braverman as Home Secretary and said he doesn't regret reappointing her. And the Northern Ireland Secretary says he's extremely disappointed that politicians missed the deadline for restoring a devolved government. The region is now set for an Assembly election before Christmas. Chris Heaton-Harris said he'll be providing an update shortly because the people of Northern Ireland deserve a fully functioning devolved government. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to the Independent Republican Mike Graham right here on Talk TV. Coming up, we're going to be talking about why the Home Office is not fit for purpose and it needs to be sorted out, probably split in half and certainly given a good going over. I'll tell you somebody else it is good going over, and that's Trevor Noah. You might remember earlier this week, Trevor Noah, the complete and utter plank, did something very, very stupid. He went on his show, which of course he took over from Jon Stewart, The Daily Show, over in America. I think he's managed to take it from over 3 million down to under 1 million. So well done, Trev, you complete and utter moron. This guy, right, has accused Britain of being a racist country. He said there's a backlash against Rishi Sunak getting Prime Minister's job because he's brown. Well, first of all, it's a load of old tosh. Second of all, I've done my response to Trevor Noah, a man who should know better but who clearly doesn't, right? And it's gone viral on TikTok, of course, TikTok being a place which is inhabited by some very odd people. And to wit, I've been attacked by some of these very odd people. I don't know who they are, because, of course, they have ridiculous names like Semhar Keren, or Eunice K, or Blue Deer Creative. Here's what they say. Semhar Keren says, Trevor is telling the truth. Well, how would you know? Eunice K says, Trevor always speaks facts. You're afraid of him and the unknown. Yeah, Trevor's so clever, he called Rishi Sunak the Prime Minister of England, which, of course, he isn't. Blue Deer Creative says, Mike Graham wishes he had 1% of the intelligence of Trevor Noah, the bloke who likes to make jokes about the Holocaust. Yeah, I tell you what, I've got 101% the intelligence of Trevor Noah. That means I'm as intelligent as him, plus 1%. How about that, Blue Deer? Sachin Manilal says he's exactly the type of person that Trevor is talking about. So what, you think I'm a racist, Sachin, for telling a bloke from South Africa who lives in America that Britain isn't racist? Right. And then, NYNE Imbase official. His audacity, though, hands off our Trevor. I'll tell you what, mate, if you're anywhere near me, it wouldn't be my hands you'd be worried about. You'd be a kick up the backside. And how about Nat77? Nat? Trevor makes him tremble. We've all seen the comments recently. He's telling the truth. What a load of old rubbish. TikTok, you'll see my reaction. You'll see that I'm right. I've never been proved wrong. You know that, don't you? Anyway, we'll see you later on TikTok. Carry on. Morgan Schondelmeyer is here, Head of External Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. We've been talking about migrants all morning. We've been talking about the state of the Home Office, the state of the police. The recovery rates for crime are so low now that they're literally solving nothing. And all they're doing now is stopping people from attempting to move Just Stop Oil protesters and Insulate Britain protesters from the roads. Incredible. Morgan, a very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
No, nice to see you. I've been saying for quite a long time that the Home Office is not fit for purpose. I don't think there's any part of it that seems to work. You've got the idea of maybe splitting it up. What would you do?
Yeah, so we have a new paper out today called A Broken Home, and it discusses the fundamental problem with the Home Office, which is that it's just too big. It is not one cohesive remit. You have two kind of very important, massive functions, which are immigration and security. So both of those things are incredibly important to the British people and incredibly important to Conservative voters, as we've seen again and again. But we're not seeing very much movement on getting these issues that you've outlined under control. So Henry Hill, the report author, proposes that we should create 2 separate departments, which split these dual functions into more manageable pieces. You would have 2 secretaries of state, 2 ministerial teams, 2 parliamentary committees for oversight, and you would have a ministry for immigration and a ministry for security.
Right. And that would make sense, wasn't it? A bit like the US set up the Department for Homeland Security, which kind of set up a completely different situation for the border control, but it also had a kind of anti-terror aspect to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's precedent for this as well. I mean, the Home Office used to be even bigger, and Tony Blair broke it up and made the Ministry of Justice. So this is about figuring out what the priorities are of this government, how to best achieve them, and to make sure that we are actually delivering results for the people of the UK.
Yeah.
So if you had a Department for Immigration, they would look at things like citizenship, passports, processing applications for immigrants. For someone like myself, as a long-term immigrant, if I'm going for indefinite leave to remain, I would deal with that ministry. And then you have the Ministry for Security, which would look at borders, national security, policing, and all of that, you know, boots on the ground sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So they would be the people responsible for stopping or at least controlling and managing the illegal migrant situation on the south coast.
That would probably be one of those dual functions that both would have to look at because of the national security implications, but also the immigrant implications.
Yeah.
But it would be a clear division between things like policing and you know, processing passports. Those don't need to be done in the same office.
No, of course. And that's just why I think the fundamental switch has to be made. And I think your idea is a good one, because at the end of the day, we should stop looking at the illegal migrant crossings as an immigration issue and start looking at it as a national security and crime issue. Because clearly and obviously, whether you like it or not, and whether the lefty liberals will admit it, an awful lot of the people coming in are being trafficked, are being made to arrive here illegally, and are in the business of criminal enterprise. And so even if it's only a small proportion of them, that's an issue.
But another big issue that is often pointed out is the backlog on processing these applications, and not just migrant applications and asylum seekers, but people who are applying for immigration of all sorts and visas of all sorts. And if you separate that and create a dedicated ministry, you have a much more focused remit, and you can have a lot more accountability and a lot more metrics that you can kind of achieve on the day-to-day to make sure that we are delivering on processing applications quickly, making sure that British citizens can access passport renewals. You know, we had the whole drama last year where passports weren't going to be in by summer holidays. And, you know, so if you have a department which is focused on this, you will end up seeing a lot more efficiencies and it won't be bogged down.
Yes, exactly right. I mean, one of the problems we do know about as well is that the internal workings of the civil service, nobody really seems to understand at all. There seems to be an awful lot of levels of management that are unnecessary. No private operation would ever be run in the same way as it would appear that the civil service is run. I mean, would your plan also kind of take a root and branch approach to that and maybe say they've got too many people working in too many jobs that are not really worth having?
Well, a fundamental split of the Home Office would require looking at every single level and every single function that it engages in right now to make sure that we're putting those jobs in the right new relevant ministries. So you would have a fundamental review. And what's interesting is Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, in his leadership campaign over the summer, he had a 10-point plan for immigration. And the 10th point was a fundamental review of the Home Office and Border Force. So we're hoping that he'll continue on in this vein and understand that it's not just about, you know, stopping migrants. It's not just about adding more police officers. It's a fundamental review of the operations of the Whitehall machine as a whole, just to make sure that we have the most efficient process as possible.
I mean, would you mind just going in there and taking it over? Because I think you're making an awful lot of sense right now, more than I've ever heard from any Home Office minister or Home Secretary in the past 10 years.
Well, that's very kind. One can hope.
We'll see what we can do. Listen, great stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Morgan Schondelmeyer, the Head of External Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. What a good idea. See, I've said for a while that the Home Office is too big, and they have got precedent for it. As you said, Tony Blair split it off and gave the Justice Ministry a new ministry. I think it's a good idea to have a sort of immigration department and a separate department for Homeland Security. I think that would make perfect sense. I think it's a very, very good idea. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We've got lots more coming up. We've got, of course, Ian Collins from 1 coming up later on, Kevin O'Sullivan and Daisy McAndrew from 4. But don't forget, Plank of the Week. the big show tonight, 7 p.m, starring James Well and Jeremy Kyle, amongst others. It's a no-miss situation. You've got to watch it, 7 p.m, Talk TV, Plank of the Week. I'm Mike Graham. Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk TV. There's a cyclist video out there, you know, and I think we're going to show it to you now because you know how I always talk about cyclists and how ridiculous they are. And this week has been particularly bad because the weather has been rather nice. And so there's been an awful lot of cyclists out and about in this very, very fine weather that we have. And as usual, they are being as rude as they can possibly be. All over the place they've been sort of circling the car. It's like driving a car through a hornet's nest. Because you've got people coming from behind you, you've got people coming across you, you've got people coming towards you, you've got people cutting across the lights, you've got people from the pavement jumping around a lamppost. You just never quite know. But have a look at this. This is a guy who tries to push one guy out of the way and then ends up on the ground. I mean, absolutely unbelievable. I mean, for anybody who knows what it's like to watch these guys, have a look at this. Look, there he goes. Oops, off you go. I mean, what a complete and utter plank. And, of course, that's the kind of thing that these cyclists do. They don't even get on with each other. These are people who basically cannot even get along with other cyclists. Oh, I don't like you haven't got the right bike. What an absolute collection of idiots. Anyway, let's talk to Stuart, who's in London. Hi, Stuart.
Hello, Mike.
How you doing, sir?
Very interesting. We talked with the lawyer earlier on.
Yes, that was a bit revealing, wasn't it?
He was said, oh, most of them are legal. I'll tell you why they say they're legal. They're so far behind, the Home Office is full to the brim of lefty, pro-immigration people.
Yes.
They're just passing them through.
Yeah. Well, you know what I also heard today from another contact of mine is that a lot of the times when there is an actual hearing scheduled, because the Home Office is so disorganised, they don't end up sending an officer to the hearing, so they just get a rubber stamp in.
Well, exactly. And they should be saying to them, well, there's 81, between the Middle East, you do your geography, there's 81 totally safe countries they can get to before here, plus all the new, that includes all the numerous safe countries they go through to Europe before they get to France. Why don't they claim asylum in one of them?
Well, that's a very good question. And, of course, you get these lefties who go, oh, but it's not illegal for them to claim asylum here because they can't do it anywhere else. Well, of course they can do it somewhere else.
You know. You claim asylum for a safe country. And what another thing they should do is say, look, we should say, I believe, and I've said it a million times, no benefits to any immigrant of any description till 100 grand is paid in taxes and national insurance contributions. If you don't like it, don't come here or leave. Or, to be fair, you can work for your benefits.
Yes.
Everyone should work.
Listen, if we've got people, if we got people who have got vacancies and they need people to come and work, I'm sure a lot of them would come and work. The ones who actually are genuinely coming here to get a better life, they want to work. I mean, we heard from our friend about the Afghan guys who have come and they want to get jobs in pizzerias. They're allowed to work here. They're allowed to be here. They should be given work permits and work visas, and they've qualified for them. But there's a big hold up because they can't get anything right.
Exactly. But then we've got the problem with the criminal element that are coming here. So it could be from Albania, extremely dangerous people.
Yeah.
I mean, these people really, basically, they need to be building a lot more prisons, big places, tighten prisons, lock them up, and you can stay there or you can voluntarily leave.
Yeah.
You're not leaving until you're free to go. Just
Exactly. Listen, something's got to be done. Stuart, appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mike, for a fantastic week of shows. I've got a lovely text here. Voicing the concerns of the British people when we feel we are not being heard or taken seriously is much appreciated. Well, that's what we do here at talkTV. And I have to say I'm indebted to somebody, Dan from Kent, who's managed to tell me actually you got it wrong. Peter Cardwell's up next. It's not Ian Collins. Sorry about that. Peter Cardwell will be here. We'll find out what he's got coming up on his show. We've got LaDonna Harvey as well from the United States of America. Yet another Biden video to show you at some point. But let's kick things off with Elon Musk, who apparently has now taken over Twitter. So will he bring Donald Trump's account back? LaDonna, a very good morning to you.
And good morning to you, too.
So,
I think the answer is probably yes, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, I think he's quite a character. I was trying to explain this to the people listening to the show this morning, that Elon Musk said, I want to buy Twitter. Twitter said, you can't. He said, OK, I won't. Then they said, now you have to. And he said, I don't want to. And then he said he would, and now he's bought it. So it's all been a bit confusing, hasn't it?
It has, but you know that happens a lot with things with Elon Musk. He's a little bit of a chaotic thinker. By the same token, he's a very forward thinker.
Yeah.
And he really truly believes in free speech, and that's why I think that he will be bringing back Donald Trump's account and probably a number of accounts of people who were banned for untruths or whatever it is you want to say that they were banned for. The other thing that he's probably going to do is get rid of the majority of the bots or figure out a way to at least tackle that head on, which Twitter has had a very difficult time doing.
Yes. And I mean, it's been quite amusing watching all the Twitter employees complaining about the fact that, they want him to be more transparent. These are the same people that block people's accounts without telling them why.
Exactly. And I think that there's a fair bit of irony there that we must savor and appreciate at least a little bit. He's started by some pretty high profile firings. He has gotten rid of the CEO and the CFO. I believe also the policy chief at Twitter. Employees, of course, there's rending of garments and gnashing of teeth because they are absolutely sure that this sacred way of communicating with the public is somehow being tarnished by Elon Musk. I don't know how he became a Bond villain, but somehow he did, and apparently that's where we are.
Well, it started somewhere in San Francisco, I suspect, and has kind of spread from there. And I wonder if these people ever get up in the morning and actually look in the mirror.
I don't know that they do. There is among those who work in social media, and I would put, a really wide range of people in this. There seems to be this belief that there is this bubble in life that you can live in, and you don't actually have to experience anything outside the bubble to be able to judge the bubble and adjudicate it guilty. And that's what these employees have managed to do, from fact checkers who don't get the facts right to, Facebook taking a call from the FBI about Hunter Biden and then turning around and going, oh, well, we believe the FBI. Well, turns out they shouldn't have. And social media companies wonder why there's this vast distrust of what they do and the way that they do it. And that's going to continue until we start to see, I think, a little more open communication. Yes. They want transparency, but they don't want to give it to you.
No, they don't want us to have it. That's brilliant, isn't it? Now, I'm thinking about starting up a section of the show called Biden of the Day. Because there's so many great videos showing the President of the United States of America. This is the latest one I spotted yesterday. Have a look.
Decision. Some airlines, if you want 6 more inches between you and the seat in front, you pay more money. But you don't know it until you purchase your ticket. Look, folks, these are junk fees. They're unfair, and they hit marginalized Americans the hardest, especially low-income folks and people of color. They benefit big corporations, not consumers.
So apparently now if you buy an airline seat with a bit more leg room, you could be a racist because you're doing down those folks on lower incomes and people of colour. I would suspect that people of lower incomes are not doing a lot of flying, are they?
Well, I mean, you would suspect that. I don't know what he's talking about with the fees. Anytime you're getting extra leg room, it says on the airline's website, this is why you're paying an extra $1,000 for your seat, because you have 6 extra inches.
Right.
It's so, does that belong in junk fees or just the land of irritation for every flyer who ever walked? And I would put it in the land of irritation. There are other fees that get tacked on to things that are, especially like if you have ever bought a concert ticket in America, it's like, wait a minute, a convenience fee. Aren't I doing this for you?
Right. Yeah.
Through you? Why am I paying for the convenience of buying the ticket through you? I'd happily walk up to the box office, but I guarantee you there's probably a convenience fee there too.
There probably is. It's like the administration fee for handling the ticket, which is literally the business that you do. I'm not paying anything extra. But let's talk. I mean, maybe Biden doesn't want to talk about the midterms. Maybe he'd rather talk about airlines and aeroplanes and low-income folks.
No, he probably doesn't want to talk about the midterms, although he's going to have to. I mean, we still are struggling with a certain amount of inflation, even though the economy is getting a little bit better. And when you're the president, no matter that it's not your fault, because it has very little to do with the president, you get the blame and you get the credit. And right now he's getting the blame, and the Democrats are going to pay for it in the midterm. They're going to lose control of both houses. For a while, I thought the Roe v. Wade decision on behalf of the Supreme Court was going to change that up a little bit. And I think it made those races a little tighter. But still, I think that the next 2 years, he is an absolute lame duck. And that's not a good look for a president whose popularity level doesn't hover above 50% and seems to be on the downturn again.
I'll tell you what also wasn't a good look was when he managed to try to make a point about Britain being a racist nation, because he seemed surprised that we had somehow managed to have a prime minister who was of Indian descent and had come from an ethnic background. And unfortunately for him, while he was trying to make the point, he managed to mispronounce his name. So instead of saying Rishi Sunak, he called him Rashid Sunak. And I'm afraid he's made it onto plank of the week for that.
Well, it is very unfortunate that our president is not making a great showing right now. I think that at his age and the time that he's had in government, I think that his time has passed. And I mean no insult against any older citizen that I'm talking to. As we know, our function just does go down as we get older, and I think that he is also exhausted by all of this. Being president, I think, might be the worst job in the world, unless your name is Liz Truss and then it's PM. But it's an incredibly stressful and horrible job, and I don't know why anybody would want it. I certainly don't. No. I'd rather sit here in my golden armchair of doom and talk about how they're messing it all up. That's much easier to do.
Listen, absolutely right. Not as well paid, though, at the end of the day. Never mind. Listen, good to talk to you, LaDonna. Thank you very much indeed. Wonderful to see you over in San Diego, California. And also wonderful to see Peter Cardwell. How are you?
Hello, Mike. How are you doing?
Very well indeed. Welcome.
Thank you very much indeed.
It's Friday lunchtime.
Certainly is, and we've just had a big U-turn from Rishi Sunak.
Oh, yeah.
One of his policies over the summer, which was something that was one of his sort of flagship ideas, was to fine people £10 if they missed a GP's appointment. Thousands of appointments missed every year. So we're going to be talking about that.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about the plan for migration. It's on the front of the Times today. Our colleagues are writing about that. A possible deal with the French, and that had a huge reaction yesterday on the programme, so we're going to be talking about that as well.
Yeah, people care an awful lot about migration, and if only the government would understand that, they might actually win the next election. Who knows? Peter Cardwell coming up for the next 3 hours. Kevin O'Sullivan later on with Daisy McAndrew. Don't forget, 7 o'clock tonight, Plank of the Week. Don't miss it. It's a belter. This is talkTV.